Three armed men pinned a woman against the boardroom wall on the 39th floor. One pressed a gun to her temple. She stopped breathing. Then the door swung open and a janitor walked in pushing a mop bucket. He wore a gray uniform. His name tag read Jack. Nobody even looked at him. That was the last mistake they ever made. But this moment didn't happen by accident. What led a decorated Navy SEAL to hide as a janitor, and what enemy from his buried past forced him to fight again, is a story you won't forget. Stay until the end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story reaches. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss a story like this. The mop hit the floor at 11:47 p.m. Jack Mercer dragged it across the tile in slow mechanical strokes, back and forth, back and forth. The fluorescent lights above him buzzed like trapped insects. The hallway on the 38th floor of Shaw Dynamics stretched out in front of him, long polished and completely empty. He liked it empty. Empty meant safe. Jack pushed his cleaning cart forward, the wheels squeaking against the floor. He was 37 years old, 6'1", with a frame that still carried the kind of muscle most men his age had already lost. His hands were rough. His posture was straight, though he tried to slouch. His eyes moved constantly left, right, up, down, even when the rest of his body stayed perfectly still. He couldn't turn it off. 14 years in the Navy SEALs had wired his brain in ways that civilian life could never undo. Every doorway was a potential entry point. Every shadow was a possible threat. Every sound, a closing elevator, a humming ventilation shaft, a distant footstep registered in his mind like coordinates on a tactical map. But tonight, he wasn't a soldier. He was a janitor. Badge number 7794. Night shift. Floors 38 through 40. He sprayed glass cleaner on the window of an executive office and wiped it down with a rag. Through the glass, he could see the Chicago skyline lit up against the dark sky. Somewhere out there in a small apartment 12 blocks south, his 9-year-old daughter Grace was asleep. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who watched her during his shifts, had texted him 40 minutes ago. She's out cold. Read 2 chapters of her book and passed out with the light on. Jack had smiled at that. He always smiled when it came to Grace. She was the only thing in his life that made sense. He finished the window and moved to the next office. His routine was the same every night. Start at 38, work up to 40, finish by 5 a.m. Clock out, walk home, make Grace breakfast, walk her to school, sleep for 5 hours, pick her up, help with homework, make dinner, put her to bed, go back to work, repeat, every single day. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't exciting. But it was stable, and stable was all Jack Mercer wanted anymore. He had tried other things after leaving the military: private security, consulting. A brief, disastrous stint working for a defense contractor that reminded him too much of everything he was running from. Nothing stuck. Nothing felt far enough away from the life he had left behind. So he took a job that nobody wanted. Night janitor. Minimum visibility, maximum anonymity. The kind of job where people looked right through you like you didn't exist. And that was exactly the point. Jack Mercer did not want to exist. Not as the man he used to be. His phone buzzed in his pocket at 12:15 a.m. He pulled it out. The screen showed a text from Danny Reeves, the only friend from his old life he still talked to. "You see the news Coronado class reunion next month. Guys are asking about you." Jack stared at the message for a long time. Then he deleted it. He slid the phone back into his pocket and kept mopping. Danny was a good man. They had gone through BUDS together, the brutal 6-month training program that separated Navy SEALs from everyone else. Out of 212 candidates in their class, only 31 graduated. Jack and Danny were 2 of them. Danny had stayed in the community. He ran a tactical training company in Virginia, now worked with law enforcement agencies, gave speeches at veterans events. He had adapted. He had found a way to carry the weight of what they had done and still function in the world. Jack hadn't. The weight was still there. It sat on his chest every night like a stone. It whispered to him in the dark. It reminded him of faces he couldn't save, decisions he couldn't take back, a mission in a country he was never supposed to name that had ended with blood on his hands and a silence in his soul that never went away. He had tried therapy, twice. The first therapist was a civilian who nodded a lot and said things like, "That must have been very difficult." Jack stopped going after 3 sessions. The second was a VA counselor who actually understood combat trauma. She was good. She was patient. She told Jack something he never forgot. You're not hiding from the world, Jack. You're hiding from yourself. And eventually the thing you're running from is going to catch up. He stopped going after that too. Not because she was wrong, because she was right. At 1:30 a.m., Jack was emptying trash cans on the 39th floor when he noticed something. The door to the server room was slightly open. He stopped. In 4 years of working this building, he had never seen that door open during his shift. It was always locked, always secured with a key card that only 3 people in the company had access to. Jack looked down the hallway. Empty. He looked at the security camera mounted above the server room door. The red light was on. It appeared to be functioning normally, but the angle was wrong. Jack had cleaned around that camera hundreds of times. He knew exactly where it pointed. And right now, it was tilted about 15 degrees to the left, just enough to create a blind spot directly in front of the server room entrance. Someone had moved it. His training kicked in before his conscious mind could stop it. Heart rate steady, breathing controlled, eyes scanning, ears filtering every sound in the building for anything out of place. He heard it. Voices, low, coming from inside the server room. Jack set down his mop. He didn't think about what he was doing. His body simply moved the way it had been trained to move, silent, efficient, precise. He positioned himself beside the door, his back flat against the wall, and listened. 2 men, maybe 3. One voice was calm, authoritative. The other was nervous, rushed. "How much time do we have?" the nervous voice asked. "Enough," the calm voice said. "The transfer will be complete in 12 minutes. Nobody checks this floor until 6. "What about the cameras?" "Handled. I told you, everything's been handled." Jack recognized the calm voice. He had heard it before in the hallways in the elevator once during a company event he was cleaning up after. It belonged to Raymond Voss, the chief operating officer of Shaw Dynamics, second most powerful person in the building. Jack's jaw tightened. He stepped back from the door, picked up his mop, and walked away. It wasn't his problem. He was a janitor. Whatever Raymond Voss was doing in that server room at 1:30 in the morning was none of his business. Jack pushed his cart to the elevator, pressed the button for the 40th floor, and told himself to forget what he had heard. He almost did. The next morning, Jack sat at the small kitchen table in his apartment and watched Grace eat cereal. She was talking about a science project, something about volcanoes. Her brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail that Jack had learned to do from a YouTube video 3 years ago. She had her mother's eyes wide, bright, full of a curiosity that Jack both loved and feared. Her mother, Rebecca, had died when Grace was 4. Ovarian cancer. Diagnosed late, treated, aggressively lost anyway. Jack had been stateside by then, already out of the military for 2 years, already working his first janitor job at a hospital in San Diego. Rebecca's death had broken something in him that was already cracked. But Grace had kept the pieces together. She was his mission now, the only mission that mattered. "Dad, are you listening?" Grace said, waving her spoon at him. Jack blinked. "Yeah, volcanoes." "I said we need baking soda and vinegar, and red food coloring. Can we get some today?" "Sure. And can I use the big bowl, the blue one?" "The blue one's for salad." "Volcanoes are more important than salad, Dad." Jack smiled. "Fair point. You can use the blue bowl." Grace grinned. She had a gap where her left canine used to be. She'd lost it 2 weeks ago and had put it under her pillow with a handwritten note that read, "Dear Tooth Fairy, inflation is real. Please adjust accordingly." Jack had left her $5 instead of the usual one. "Dad?" Grace said, her voice suddenly quieter. "Yeah. Are you okay? You look tired." Jack reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm always tired, kid. That's what being old feels like." "You're not old." "Tell that to my knees." Grace laughed. It was the best sound in the world. Jack finished his coffee, walked Grace to school, came home and sat on the edge of his bed. He stared at the wall, the server room, the voices. Raymond Voss, "It's not your problem." He lay down and closed his eyes, but he didn't sleep. That night, Jack went back to work. He clocked in at 10 p.m., grabbed his cart, and started on the 38th floor like always. He told himself it was a normal night. He told himself to stick to the routine. But when the elevator doors opened on 39, his feet took him straight to the server room. The door was closed, locked. The camera was back in its correct position. Everything looked normal. Jack stood there for a long moment staring at that door. Then he turned around and saw someone standing at the end of the hallway. A woman. Tall, dark hair pulled back, wearing a business suit that looked like it cost more than Jack made in a month. She was holding a tablet and staring at him with an expression that was equal parts suspicion and exhaustion. Catherine Shaw, CEO of Shaw Dynamics, founder's daughter, the person whose name was literally on the building. Jack had seen her before, but always from a distance. She worked late, sometimes not as late as him, but late enough that their paths had occasionally crossed. She had never spoken to him. He was the night janitor. She was the CEO. They existed in completely different galaxies. Until now. "You're the janitor," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." She walked toward him. Her heels clicked against the tile. She stopped about 6 feet away and studied him, the way Jack had seen intelligence officers study intercepted documents, carefully, methodically looking for something hidden beneath the surface. "What are you doing on this floor?" she asked. "Cleaning. At this hour, near the server room. I clean this floor every night, ma'am. 38 through 40. It's my assignment." Catherine stared at him. Jack stared back. He kept his expression neutral, blank. The face of a man who had nothing to hide and nothing to offer. The face he had practiced for 4 years. Catherine's eyes narrowed slightly. Then she seemed to make a decision. She looked down at her tablet and swiped through something. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jack. Jack Mercer." "How long have you worked here, Jack?" 4 years. 4 years, she repeated almost to herself. She looked up at him again. "Have you noticed anything unusual on this floor recently? Anything out of the ordinary?" Jack felt the question land in his chest like a bullet. She knew something. She didn't know what exactly, but she knew something was wrong. He could see it in her eyes, the same look he had seen in the eyes of soldiers who sensed an ambush before the first shot was fired. He had 2 choices. Tell her what he heard, get involved, risk everything, or lie, walk away, stay invisible. "No, ma'am," Jack said. "Nothing unusual." Catherine held his gaze for 3 more seconds. Then she nodded. "Good night, Jack." "Good night, ma'am." She turned and walked toward the elevator. Jack watched her go. The doors opened. She stepped inside. The doors closed. Jack stood alone in the hallway. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from anger, at himself. Over the next 2 weeks, Jack tried to go back to normal. He mopped floors, he emptied trash cans, he cleaned windows, he picked up Grace from school, he helped her build her volcano, he watched it erupt in the kitchen and cleaned baking soda off the ceiling for an hour. Normal life, safe life. But every night at work he noticed more. Strange men entering the building after midnight. They didn't wear employee badges. They didn't sign in at the front desk. They used a side entrance that Jack knew was supposed to be alarmed, but never triggered. He saw Raymond Voss meeting with these men in the parking garage at 2 a.m. He saw files being carried out in briefcases. He saw a technician he didn't recognize installing something on the 39th floor network panel. And twice he saw Catherine Shaw working alone in her office at 1 a.m. surrounded by papers, her face lit by the glow of her computer screen, her expression tight with a kind of focused desperation that Jack recognized immediately. She was fighting something, and she was losing. Jack knew the signs. He had seen them in combat, the narrowing focus, the sleepless eyes, the subtle tremor in the hands that nobody else noticed. Catherine Shaw was a woman under siege, and she was trying to hold the walls by herself. It reminded him of something. It reminded him of himself. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Jack was finishing up the 40th floor at 3 a.m. when he heard a sound that made every nerve in his body fire at once. A woman screaming. Not a scream of surprise, not a scream of frustration, a scream of terror. It came from below, the 39th floor. Jack dropped his mop and moved. He didn't take the elevator. He hit the stairwell and descended the flight of stairs in 4 seconds flat, a pace that would have surprised anyone who saw the slow, shuffling janitor they were used to. He pushed through the stairwell door onto 39 and stopped. The hallway was empty, but the sound had come from the direction of Catherine Shaw's office. Jack moved down the hallway, his footsteps silent. Every door he passed was closed and dark. The floor was supposed to be empty at this hour. Nobody worked this late except Catherine, and even she usually left by midnight. He reached her office. The door was open. Inside, Catherine was standing behind her desk, her phone in her hand, her face white. Across from her, leaning against the doorframe with the casual confidence of a man who owned the room, was Raymond Voss. 2 other men stood behind him. They wore dark suits. Their hands were clasped in front of them. They weren't building employees. Jack could tell from the way they stood, feet shoulder-width apart, weight-balanced eyes scanning. These were professionals. Security. Private military. The kind of men corporations hired when they wanted muscle without fingerprints. Jack pressed himself against the wall just outside the door and listened. "Put the phone down, Catherine," Raymond said. His voice was smooth, controlled, almost friendly. "There's nobody to call." "Get out of my office," Catherine said. Her voice was steady, but Jack could hear the fracture beneath it. "I'm calling the police." "And telling them what? That your COO came to discuss a business proposal after hours. That's not a crime, Catherine. That's Tuesday. You broke into my office. The door was open. It was locked." Raymond smiled. "Was it? I don't remember it that way, and neither will they." He gestured toward the two men behind him. "Do you gentlemen?" Neither man responded. Catherine's hand tightened around her phone. "I know what you're doing, Raymond. I've seen the financial records, the transfers to offshore accounts, the unauthorized access to our research files. I know everything." Raymond's smile didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. A coldness, a calculation. "You know pieces," he said. "Fragments. Nothing that would hold up in court, and nothing that anyone on the board would believe. I've spent 6 years building relationships with every member of that board, Catherine. I've played golf with them. I've had dinner with their wives. I've helped their children get internships." He paused. "You've spent 6 years buried in your lab chasing your father's dream. Who do you think they trust more?" Catherine's jaw clenched. "My father built this company." "Your father is dead." The words hit the room like a slap. "And the company he built," Raymond continued, stepping closer, "is sitting on technology worth $3 billion. Medical AI that can diagnose diseases faster than any doctor alive. Technology that governments and pharmaceutical companies would kill for. And you want to what? Give it away, license it at cost, save the world. It's what the technology was designed to do. It's what your father wanted it to do, but your father isn't here anymore. And the board is starting to realize that sentiment doesn't pay dividends." Catherine took a step back. Her shoulders were tense. Her eyes were burning. "You're stealing from this company. You're selling our proprietary data to competitors. And when I prove it—" "You won't prove anything," Raymond said, and now the friendliness was gone. His voice was flat, hard, the voice of a man who had stopped pretending. "Because by tomorrow morning the board will receive a report showing that you've been mismanaging company funds for the past 2 years. Fabricated, of course, but convincing, detailed, and supported by documents that my people have spent months preparing." Catherine stared at him. "You're framing me." "I'm protecting the company. That's what I'll tell them, and they'll believe me, because I'm Raymond Voss. I'm the man who keeps the lights on. And you, Catherine, you're the founder's daughter who was never quite ready for the job." Silence filled the room. Jack stood in the hallway, his back against the wall, his fists clenched. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him. "Go in! Stop this! Protect her!" But another voice, older, quieter, heavier, said something else. "Stay out of it. You have a daughter. You have a life. You promised yourself, never again." Catherine spoke. Her voice was low, controlled. But Jack heard the tremble. "Get out of my office, Raymond, now!" Raymond studied her for a moment. Then he straightened his tie, turned to his men, and nodded toward the door. "Think about what I said, Catherine. You have until Friday. Sign the restructuring agreement, step down quietly, and I'll make sure you walk away with enough money to live comfortably. Refuse, and I will bury you." He paused at the door. "Your choice." He walked out. His 2 men followed. They passed within 3 feet of Jack, who stood motionless in the shadow of a recessed doorway across the hall. None of them saw him. They never did. Jack waited until the elevator doors closed behind them. Then he stepped out of the shadow and looked through the open door of Catherine's office. She was sitting in her chair now, both hands flat on the desk, staring at nothing. Her phone lay on the desk in front of her. She hadn't called anyone. Jack stood there for a long time. Then he turned and walked away. High mod at 3 steps. 3 steps down that hallway before he stopped. He thought about Grace. He thought about what he would tell her if she asked him what happened tonight. If she asked him whether he helped someone who needed help, or whether he walked away because it was easier. He thought about Rebecca, about what she would have said. He could hear her voice, clear as a bell even after 5 years. Jack Mercer, if you walk past somebody drowning because you don't want to get your shoes wet, I swear to God, I will haunt you. Jack closed his eyes. Then he turned around. He walked back to Catherine's office and knocked on the open door. Catherine looked up. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She was past crying. She was in the territory beyond tears, the cold, clear space where the only options left were fight or collapse. "What do you want?" she said. Not rude, just empty. Jack stepped into the doorway. "I heard everything." Catherine stiffened. "Excuse me." Raymond Voss, the financial transfers, the offshore accounts, the board manipulation, the frame job. I heard all of it. Catherine stood up slowly. Her eyes locked on his. "You were listening." "I was in the hallway. I heard you scream. I came down from 40. "You came down from—" She stopped. She looked at him more carefully now. Really looked at him. Not through him, the way everyone else did. At him. "You're the janitor, Jack." "Yes, ma'am." "And you just happened to overhear my COO threatening to destroy my company and frame me for embezzlement." "Yes, ma'am." "And you're telling me this because—" Jack was quiet for a moment. He looked at the floor, then back at her. "Because 4 years ago I walked away from a situation where someone needed help. I told myself it wasn't my fight. I told myself I had my own problems. I told myself that getting involved would only make things worse." He paused. "I was wrong, and I've been carrying that mistake every day since." Catherine studied him. "So this is what guilt—" "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending I don't see things." Catherine sat back down. She rubbed her temples with both hands. "Jack, I appreciate the sentiment, I really do. But you're a janitor. No offense. You clean floors. Raymond Voss has lawyers, board connections, private security, and enough money to make problems disappear. What exactly are you going to do?" Jack looked at her, and for the first time in 4 years, he let the mask slip. Just a fraction, just enough for her to see something behind the blank, harmless expression of the invisible janitor. Something sharp, something dangerous, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. "I'm going to help you," he said quietly, "if you'll let me." Catherine tilted her head. She was evaluating him. He could see the gears turning behind her eyes. The analytical mind that had built a medical AI system sophisticated enough to revolutionize healthcare was now turning its full attention on the man standing in her doorway in a gray janitor's uniform. "Why would I trust you?" she asked. "You shouldn't," Jack said. "You don't know me, you don't know anything about me, and I'm going to keep it that way for now, but I can tell you 3 things." "I'm listening." "First, the men with Raymond tonight weren't regular security. They were former military contractors, private sector. I could tell by the way they carried themselves. Whatever Raymond is doing, it's bigger than a corporate power play. He's brought in outside muscle, which means he's planning for a scenario where things get physical." Catherine's face went pale. "How do you know what military contractors look like?" Jack ignored the question. "Second, the security camera outside the server room on this floor was repositioned 2 weeks ago. 15-degree tilt to the left. It created a blind spot that allowed someone to enter the server room without being recorded. I saw it during my shift. Someone is accessing that room after hours." Catherine leaned forward. "You noticed the camera angle." "Third," Jack continued, "Raymond told you that you have until Friday. That gives us 3 days. If his frame job is as detailed as he claims, he's been building it for months. We're not going to outlawyer him. We're not going to outspend him. We need to find the evidence he doesn't know exists and move faster than he thinks we can." Catherine was staring at him now with an expression he had seen before, the expression of someone whose assumptions about reality had just been shattered. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I told you, I'm the janitor." "Nobody talks like that. Nobody sees like that. Janitors don't analyze camera angles and identify military contractors by their posture." Jack said nothing. Catherine stood up. She walked around her desk until she was standing directly in front of him. Close enough that he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the faint tremor in her left hand that she kept pressed against her thigh to hide it. "I need to know who I'm trusting," she said. "If you want to help me, you need to give me something real." Jack looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "I spent 14 years in the United States Navy. Most of that time in a unit I can't name, doing things I can't talk about in places that don't officially exist on any mission report. I left because something happened that I couldn't live with. I moved to Chicago, got a job pushing a mop, and spent the last 4 years trying to be nobody. Catherine's mouth opened slightly. I'm not a bodyguard, Jack said. I'm not for hire. I'm not doing this for money or recognition or some kind of redemption story. I'm doing this because I watched a man threaten a woman in her own building, and I'm tired of walking away. The room was quiet. Catherine's eyes searched his face. She was looking for the lie, the angle, the hidden agenda. Jack knew this because he would have done the same thing. She didn't find one. 3 days, she said finally. 3 days. And if we can't find the evidence, we will. You don't know that. No, Jack admitted, but I know what happens if we don't try. Catherine took a deep breath. She extended her hand. Jack looked at it, then he shook it. Her grip was firm, stronger than he expected. Don't make me regret this, Jack. I'll do my best. She almost smiled. Almost. That's not exactly reassuring. It's the best I've got. Jack left the building at 5 a.m. The sun was coming up over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and gray. He walked the 12 blocks to his apartment, his mind running at full speed for the first time in years. He thought about Raymond Voss, the way the man had stood in Catherine's office like he already owned it. The confidence, the certainty, the utter absence of doubt. Jack had seen men like Raymond before, in war zones, in intelligence briefings, in the eyes of men who believed they were untouchable because they had always been protected by power. Those men were dangerous, not because they were strong, but because they had never been challenged by someone who operated outside their system. Raymond Voss knew how to handle lawyers, board members, journalists, and regulators. He did not know how to handle a Navy SEAL. Jack arrived at his apartment building and climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Grace was already awake. She was sitting on the couch in her pajamas, eating toast and watching a nature documentary about octopuses. Did you know octopuses have 3 hearts? She said without looking up. I did not know that. And if they lose an arm, they can grow it back. Handy. Grace looked at him. She frowned. You look weird, Dad. Weird how? I don't know. Like you're thinking really hard about something. Jack sat down next to her on the couch. He put his arm around her and pulled her close. She smelled like toast and strawberry shampoo. I'm always thinking about something, he said. Usually you look tired thinking. Today you look awake thinking. Jack kissed the top of her head. That's very observant. Mrs. Patterson says I'm perceptive. Mrs. Patterson is right. Grace snuggled closer. They watched the octopus documentary in silence for a few minutes. Jack felt her breathing slow as she leaned against him. Dad, yeah, is everything okay? Jack looked down at his daughter, at her small hands, at the gap in her smile, at the absolute trust in her eyes. He thought about what he was getting into, the risk, the exposure, the possibility that the world he had spent 4 years hiding from was about to crash through his front door. Everything's fine, Gracie, he said. It was the first lie he had told her in a very long time, and he hated himself for it. That afternoon, while Grace was at school, Jack did something he hadn't done in 4 years. He opened the closet in his bedroom. Behind the winter coats and the box of Grace's baby clothes and the broken vacuum cleaner he kept meaning to fix, there was a black duffel bag. It was pushed all the way to the back, buried under a pile of old blankets. Jack pulled it out and set it on the bed. He stared at it for a long time. Then he unzipped it. Inside was a life he had tried to forget. A tactical vest folded neatly, a pair of night vision monoculars, a small kit of electronic surveillance tools devices that could detect hidden cameras, intercept wireless signals, and bypass commercial security systems. A laminated card with a series of codes that could access classified military databases, and at the bottom, wrapped in a cloth, a photograph. Jack picked it up. The photo showed 6 men standing in a desert, their faces dirty, their eyes sharp, their arms around each other's shoulders. They were smiling. Behind them, a Black Hawk helicopter sat on a dusty landing strip. Jack was in the center of the group, younger, leaner, a different man. 3 of the 6 men in that photograph were dead. 1 was missing. 1 was Danny Reeves, who still called every month and whose calls Jack rarely returned. And 1 was Jack. He looked at the photograph for a long time, at the faces of men he had loved like brothers, at the ghost of the person he used to be. Then he put the photograph back in the bag. He took out the surveillance kit. He had made his choice. That night, Jack went to work at Shaw Dynamics for the 4,037th time, but for the first time he wasn't there to clean. He moved through the building the way he always did, quiet, invisible, unremarkable. He pushed his cart, he mopped floors, he emptied trash cans, but between tasks, he worked. He checked the server room door on 39. He examined the lock mechanism. It had been replaced recently. The hardware was newer than the surrounding fixtures. Someone had upgraded it in the last month. He inspected every security camera on floors 38 through 40. 3 of them had been repositioned. 2 had their recording schedules modified. They went dark for exactly 22 minutes every night, between 1:15 and 1:37 a.m. He checked the side entrance that the unknown men had been using. The alarm system was intact, but the sensor had been bypassed with a simple magnetic override, the kind of modification that took 30 seconds and a $5 magnet from any hardware store. Jack documented everything in his head. He didn't write anything down. He didn't take photos. He stored it the way he had been trained to store intelligence in the field, organized, categorized, retrievable on demand. At 2 a.m. he took the elevator to the 40th floor and knocked on Catherine's office door. She was there. Of course she was there. She probably hadn't left the building since last night. "Come in," she said. Jack closed the door behind him. "Tell me everything you know about Raymond Voss," he said. Catherine looked up from her computer. She had changed clothes since yesterday. A different suit. Same exhaustion. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a paper plate next to her keyboard. 3 empty coffee cups stood in a row like soldiers. "He's been COO for 6 years," she said. "My father hired him to handle the business side while we focused on R&D. He was good at it. Brilliant, actually. Revenue tripled under his management. The board loves him." "When did you first suspect something was wrong?" Catherine leaned back in her chair. 7 months ago, I was reviewing quarterly financials and noticed discrepancies in the research and development budget. Small amounts at first. 100,000 here, 200,000 there. Redirected to subsidiary accounts that I'd never heard of. "Did you confront him?" "Not right away. I hired a forensic accountant, quietly, off the books. She traced the redirected funds to a network of shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Luxembourg. The money trail was sophisticated, professional, not the kind of thing one person sets up alone." "How much?" "At least $47 million over 3 years. Jack let out a slow breath. "That's not embezzlement. That's an operation." "Exactly. And it gets worse." Catherine turned her computer screen toward him. "The shell companies aren't just receiving money. They're licensing our medical AI technology to foreign buyers, defense contractors, pharmaceutical conglomerates, people who want to use our diagnostic algorithms for purposes that my father would have found unconscionable." "Who are the buyers?" "I've identified 3 so far. One is a Chinese pharmaceutical company with ties to the PLA. One is a private intelligence firm based in London. And one is..." She hesitated. "One is a former defense contractor in Virginia that does business with the U.S. government." Jack felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What's the name of the Virginia contractor?" he asked. "Greystone Analytics." The room seemed to shift. Jack knew that name. He knew it very well. Greystone Analytics had been involved in a mission he had been part of. A mission that had ended badly. A mission that was buried so deep in classified archives that it officially didn't exist. And the man who had run Greystone during that mission, the man who had fed them bad intelligence, who had sent them into a situation that cost 3 good men their lives, had never been held accountable. Because men like that never were. Jack looked at Catherine. His face revealed nothing. But inside something was shifting. Something that had been dormant for 4 years was waking up, blinking in the light, stretching its muscles. "Jack," Catherine said, "do you know that name?" "Yeah," Jack said quietly. "I know that name." "How?" Jack looked at her for a long time. "That's a story for another day," he said. "Right now we focus on Raymond. Tell me about Friday. What exactly is he asking you to sign?" Catherine pulled a document from her desk drawer and handed it to him. "A corporate restructuring agreement. It transfers operational control of all Shaw Dynamics research divisions to a newly created subsidiary managed by Raymond and a group of outside investors. I'd retain my title as CEO, but I'd have no authority over the technology. It's a takeover disguised as a reorganization." Jack scanned the document. His eyes moved quickly. Years of reading tactical briefings had taught him how to extract critical information from dense text in seconds. "This gives them everything," he said. "Everything my father built. Everything I've spent my life working toward. They want the AI Jack. They want to strip it from the company, sell it to the highest bidder, and leave Monroe Dynamics as an empty shell." "Shaw Dynamics," Jack corrected quietly. Catherine looked at him. "What? You said Monroe Dynamics. Did I?" She rubbed her eyes. "I'm losing my mind." "You're not losing your mind. You're exhausted and you're under attack. Two different things." Catherine managed a weak smile. "You have a very direct way of talking. Comes with the territory." "Which territory? Janitorial work or—" "Yes." They looked at each other. For a moment something passed between them that had nothing to do with corporate espionage or military backgrounds or the ticking clock of Raymond Voss's Friday deadline. It was recognition. Two people who had been fighting alone for too long, suddenly realizing they weren't alone anymore. "So what do we do?" Catherine asked. Jack set the document down on her desk. "We don't play his game," he said. "Raymond expects you to react, to panic, to hire lawyers and fight him in boardrooms where he's already bought the referees. We're not going to do that." "Then what?" "We go where he's not looking. The server room, the financial records, the communications between him and his buyers. He thinks he's covered his tracks, but nobody covers every track. There's always a gap, a mistake, a piece of evidence that didn't get deleted because someone got lazy or arrogant. And if there isn't, there is. Men like Raymond always leave a trail, because deep down they don't believe anyone is smart enough to find it." Catherine looked at him. She was scared. Jack could see it. But underneath the fear, there was something else, something harder, something that refused to break. "You've done this before," she said. "Not this exactly, but something like this. You've gone after people who thought they were untouchable." Jack didn't answer. He didn't have to. "Wednesday night," he said. "I'll need access to the server room. Can you get me a key card?" Catherine hesitated. Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small white card. She held it out to him. "This was my father's master key card. It opens every door in the building. Raymond doesn't know it still exists." Jack took the card. It was light in his hand, just a piece of plastic with a magnetic strip, but it felt heavier than anything he had carried in years. "Wednesday night," he said again. "Wednesday night," Catherine agreed. Jack turned and walked to the door. "Jack." He stopped. "Thank you," Catherine said, "for not walking away." Jack stood in the doorway. He thought about Grace, about Rebecca, about the photograph in the black duffel bag, and the 3 dead men smiling in the desert sun. "Don't thank me yet," he said. And then he disappeared into the hallway, pushing his cleaning cart invisible once again. But not for much longer. Wednesday came faster than Jack wanted it to. He spent most of Tuesday in a state he hadn't felt in 4 years' operational awareness. His mind was running tactical calculations in the background, while his body went through the motions of civilian life. He walked Grace to school. He smiled at her teacher. He bought groceries. He sat on a bench in the park and watched pigeons fight over breadcrumbs. But the whole time he was planning. Entry points, exit routes, camera positions, timing windows, the 22-minute blackout between 1:15 and 1:37 a.m., the side entrance with the bypassed alarm, the new lock on the server room door, the master keycard in his pocket that felt like a grenade with the pin half pulled. He picked Grace up from school at 3:15. She was carrying a drawing she had made in art class, a picture of a house with 2 stick figures standing in front of it. One tall, one small, both smiling. "That's us," Grace said, holding it up. "I can see that. Nice house. It's got a yard and a dog. We don't have a dog." "That's the problem, Dad." Jack laughed. It was real. It was the only real thing he had felt all day. They walked home together, Grace talking about a boy in her class who had tried to eat a crayon, and how her teacher, Mrs. Delgado, had made a face that Grace described as like she swallowed a wasp. Jack listened to every word. He absorbed it. He held on to it the way a drowning man holds onto a piece of driftwood, because he knew that tonight he was going back underwater. At 6 p.m., Mrs. Patterson came over. She was 73 years old, 5 feet tall, and had the energy of a woman half her age. She had been watching Grace during Jack's night shifts since they moved to Chicago. She never asked questions about Jack's life before the janitor job. She never pried. She just showed up, made tea-read books with Grace, and left a plate of cookies on the counter that Jack would find when he came home at 5 a.m. She was the closest thing to family they had. "Going to be a late one tonight," Mrs. Patterson asked as she settled into the armchair with her knitting. Might be, Jack said. Everything all right? You seem tense. Just tired. Mrs. Patterson looked at him over the rim of her glasses. She had a way of looking at people that made Jack feel like she could see through walls. You know, she said, my husband Harold was a quiet man too. Kept everything inside, never wanted to worry anyone. And one day his doctor told him his blood pressure was so high it was a miracle he hadn't popped like a balloon. She clicked her knitting needles together. I'm just saying. I appreciate the concern, Mrs. Patterson. I'm not concerned. I'm nosy. There's a difference. Jack smiled. He kissed Grace goodnight, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. Dad, Grace called from the couch. He turned. Yeah, be careful. It was such a strange thing for a 9-year-old to say. Not bye or see you in the morning. Be careful. Like she sensed something. Like she knew on some instinctive level that children sometimes operated on that tonight was different. Always am Gracie. He closed the door behind him and walked into the night. The air was cold, Chicago cold, the kind that bit through your jacket and settled into your bones. Jack walked the 12 blocks to Shaw Dynamics with his hands in his pockets and his mind running through the plan one more time. Get in, access the server room, copy the financial records and communication logs. Get out, give everything to Catherine, let her take it from there. Simple, clean, no confrontation, no exposure, in and out like a ghost. That was the plan. Plans, Jack had learned it a long time ago, rarely survived contact with reality. He clocked in at 10 p.m., grabbed his cart, took the elevator to 38, started mopping. For 3 hours he worked his normal routine. He cleaned offices, he emptied bins, he wiped down conference tables and vacuumed carpets. Anyone watching the security footage would see exactly what they expected to see the night janitor doing his job. At 1:10 a.m., 5 minutes before the camera blackout window, Jack pushed his cart into the supply closet on 39 and closed the door. He reached into the bottom shelf of his cart beneath the cleaning supplies and pulled out a small black case. Inside were the electronic tools from the duffel bag in his closet, a signal scanner, a data transfer device, a USB drive with enough encryption to make the NSA nervous. He checked his watch. 1:14 a.m., 1 minute. Jack slipped the master keycard into his pocket, tucked the black case under his arm, and stepped out of the supply closet. The hallway was empty, silent. The fluorescent lights hummed above him like a low-frequency prayer. 1:15 a.m. The cameras went dark. Jack moved. He crossed the hallway in 8 seconds. His footsteps made no sound. 14 years of tactical movement, of crossing hostile terrain in complete darkness, of entering buildings where every room might contain someone trying to kill him, had given him a way of moving that was almost supernatural in its silence. He reached the server room door. He swiped the master keycard. The lock clicked. The door opened. Jack stepped inside and closed it behind him. The server room was cold. Rows of black towers hummed and blinked in the dim blue light. The air smelled like ozone and recycled cold. Jack ignored all of it. He had 17 minutes before the cameras came back online. He found the main terminal in the center of the room. He sat down, plugged in his data transfer device, and went to work. His fingers moved across the keyboard with a speed and precision that would have stunned anyone who had ever watched him slowly push a mop across a tile floor. He navigated the company's internal network, bypassing firewalls and access restrictions, with techniques he had learned from the best cyber warfare specialists in the military. In 4 minutes, he found the first layer. The financial records. Catherine had described the redirected R&D funds, the shell companies in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Luxembourg. It was all there, buried beneath 3 levels of encryption that a civilian forensic accountant would have needed months to crack. Jack cracked it in 6 minutes. He copied everything to the USB drive. Then he went deeper. Behind the financial records, there was a second layer, a hidden partition on the server that didn't appear on any standard network map. It was protected by a military-grade encryption protocol that Jack recognized immediately because he had used the same protocol during his years in special operations. Someone with serious connections had set this up. Jack broke through in 3 minutes. His hands were steady. His breathing was calm. But his heart was hammering, because what he found on the other side of that encryption was worse than anything he had expected. Communications. Hundreds of them. Encrypted emails between Raymond Voss and at least 7 external parties. Buyers. Brokers. Intelligence operatives. People who traded in stolen technology the way Wall Street traders dealt in stocks. And one name kept appearing over and over again. Thomas Kessler. Jack's blood went cold. Thomas Kessler, former CEO of Greystone Analytics, the man who had provided the intelligence briefing for Operation Nightfall, the mission that had sent Jack's team into an ambush in a country that didn't officially appear on any mission report, the mission that killed 3 of his brothers, the mission that ended Jack's career, the mission that haunted him every single night for the last 7 years. Thomas Kessler was supposed to be retired, disappeared, out of the game. But here he was buried in Raymond Voss's encrypted files, pulling strings from the shadows like he had never left. Jack stared at the screen. His hands had stopped moving. For a moment, just a moment, he wasn't in a server room in Chicago. He was back in the desert, sand in his mouth, blood on his hands, the sound of gunfire and screaming, and the helicopter that came too late. He could see their faces. Mitchell, Briggs, Donahue, smiling in the photograph, dead in the sand, because Thomas Kessler had fed them bad intelligence, because Thomas Kessler had traded their lives for a weapons contract, and nobody had ever held him accountable. Jack's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He checked his watch. 1:29 a.m., 8 minutes left. He copied everything, every file, every email, every communication. He swept the entire hidden partition onto his encrypted USB drive and then covered his tracks, erasing the access logs, resetting the security protocols, making it look like nobody had ever been there. At 1:35 a.m., 2 minutes before the cameras came back online, Jack stepped out of the server room, swiped the keycard to lock the door, and walked back to the supply closet. He stashed the black case back in his cart. He picked up his mop. At 1:37 a.m., the cameras came back on. They recorded exactly what they were supposed to record: an empty hallway on the 39th floor. Jack Mercer had never been there. He finished his shift at 5 a.m. He clocked out. He walked home. He made Grace breakfast. He walked her to school. Then he went back to his apartment, sat at the kitchen table, and plugged the USB drive into a battered laptop he kept under the bed. For 3 hours he read. The deeper he went into the files, the worse it got. Raymond Voss wasn't just stealing from Shaw Dynamics. He was running a parallel operation, a shadow company, built inside the legitimate one, siphoning technology data and intellectual property to a network of buyers who would use the medical AI for things its creators never intended. Military applications, mass surveillance, predictive behavioral modeling, tools that could diagnose a person's physical and psychological vulnerabilities and exploit them. And Thomas Kessler was the architect. Kessler had been doing this for years. Greystone Analytics had been shut down after a congressional investigation, but Kessler had simply moved his operation underground. He found companies with valuable technology, installed operatives like Raymond Voss in leadership positions, and systematically stripped them of their most valuable assets. Shaw Dynamics was his latest target. Catherine Shaw was his latest obstacle. And if the communications Jack had read were any indication, Kessler had no intention of letting her stand in his way. One email in particular made Jack's blood pressure spike. It was from Kessler to Voss, dated 3 weeks ago. The language was coded, but Jack had spent years reading intelligence communications. The meaning was clear. If Catherine didn't sign the restructuring agreement by Friday, they would escalate. And escalate, in Thomas Kessler's vocabulary, had never meant lawyers and board meetings. It meant something much worse. Jack closed the laptop. He sat in the silence of his apartment and stared at the drawing Grace had made, the house with the yard and the dog and the 2 stick figures smiling. He thought about what he was getting into. I thought about what would happen if Kessler found out who had been digging through his files. He thought about Grace. Then he picked up his phone and sent a text to a number he hadn't used in over a year. Danny, I need to talk. It's about Nightfall. The response came in 11 seconds. Where and when? Jack typed back. Video call. Tonight. After my shift. I'll be there. Jack put the phone down. His hands were shaking again. Not from fear, not from anger this time, from something else. Something that felt like waking up. At 2 a.m. Thursday morning, Jack knocked on Catherine's office door. She opened it immediately, like she had been standing on the other side waiting for him. She was wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business suit. Her hair was down. She looked younger. She also looked like she hadn't slept in 3 days, which was probably accurate. Well, she said. Jack stepped inside and closed the door. He set the USB drive on her desk. It's worse than you think, he said. Catherine picked up the drive and turned it in her fingers. How much worse? Sit down. She sat. Jack told her everything. The financial records, the hidden partition, the encrypted communications, the network of buyers, the military applications of her medical AI, the shadow operation built inside her company like a parasite feeding on its host. He told her about Thomas Kessler. He didn't tell her about Nightfall. Not yet. Catherine listened without interrupting. Her face went through a series of transformations as Jack spoke. Disbelief, then anger, then fear, then something cold and hard that settled over her features like a mask. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. 47 million, she finally said. That's what I thought he stole. What's the real number? Based on the contracts I found in those files, the total value of the technology Raymond has sold or licensed through Kessler's network is somewhere around $320 million. Catherine closed her eyes. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair so hard her knuckles went white. My father spent his entire career developing that technology, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He poured everything into it, his time, his health, his marriage. He believed it could save millions of lives. He used to say that the measure of a technology isn't what it can do, it's what it's allowed to do. And these people, her voice cracked, these people took what he built and turned it into a weapon. I know, Jack said. No, you don't know. Catherine opened her eyes. They were bright with tears she refused to let fall. My father died 2 years ago, heart attack. The doctor said it was stress-related. He knew something was wrong with the company before he died. He told me. He said he felt like someone was pulling the floor out from under him one board at a time, and he couldn't figure out who. He died thinking he had failed. He died thinking the company was falling apart because of his mistakes. She looked at Jack. It wasn't his mistakes. It was Raymond. It was Kessler. They were already inside the walls, and my father never saw them. Jack said nothing. There was nothing to say. He understood the kind of anger that came from realizing someone you loved had suffered because of someone else's cruelty. It was the kind of anger that either destroyed you or forged you into something harder. Catherine wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. One quick motion, then the mask was back. So what do we do with this? She asked, pointing at the USB drive. We can't go to the authorities, not yet. Half of what's on that drive was obtained without authorization. Any lawyer Voss hires will argue it's inadmissible. And if Kessler has connections in the intelligence community, which he does, going to the FBI could actually tip them off before we're ready. Then what's the point of having it? Leverage and intelligence. We know what they're doing, who they're doing it with, and how they're moving the money. They don't know we know. That's an advantage we can't waste. Catherine leaned forward. Friday is tomorrow, Jack. Raymond gave me until Friday. What happens when I don't sign? He'll escalate. What does that mean? Jack hesitated. He didn't want to scare her more than she already was, but she deserved the truth. Kessler's last communication to Voss indicated that if the restructuring agreement isn't signed voluntarily, they'll move to a more aggressive approach. The language was vague, but based on the assets Kessler has deployed in previous operations, I'd expect them to bring in a tactical team to secure the building and force the transfer under duress. Catherine stared at him. You're telling me they're going to physically take over my company? I'm telling you it's possible. With armed men. Yes. In downtown Chicago. It wouldn't be the first time something like this happened. A building takeover disguised as a security event. They lock down the floors, control the exits, bring in their own tech team to transfer the data, and force you to sign under conditions that look voluntary on paper. By the time anyone outside the building realizes something is wrong, it's over. Catherine stood up. She paced behind her desk. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was steady when she spoke. I'm not signing anything. I don't care what they do. I'm not giving them my father's work. I know. So how do we stop them? Jack looked at her. I'm working on that. That's not good enough, Jack. I need a plan, a real plan, not I'm working on it. You'll have one by tomorrow night. That's cutting it awfully close. I know, but I need to talk to someone first. Someone who knows Kessler. Someone who might have information we can use. Who? A friend from my previous life. Catherine stopped pacing. She looked at him. Can you trust this person? With my life. I already have. Multiple times. Fine. Talk to your friend. But Jack, if Friday comes and we don't have a plan, I'm going to the FBI myself. Evidence admissibility be damned. Fair enough. Jack turned to leave. He was halfway to the door when Catherine spoke again. Jack, the way you got into that server room, the encryption you broke, the way you analyzed those communications. She paused. You weren't just a regular sailor, were you? Jack stopped. He didn't turn around. No, ma'am, I wasn't. What were you? He stood there for a moment, the weight of the question pressing down on him like a physical force. I was the person they sent when every other option had failed, he said quietly, and right now I'm the janitor who's running late on the 40th floor. He walked out. Catherine stood alone in her office, holding a USB drive that contained $320 million worth of stolen secrets, and realized that the most dangerous person in her building was the one everyone had been stepping over for 4 years. The video call with Danny Reeves happened at 6 a.m. Thursday morning, after Jack got home from his shift. Danny appeared on screen, looking exactly the way Jack remembered him, broad-shouldered, square-jawed with a buzz cut that hadn't changed since buds and eyes that were simultaneously warm and lethal. He was sitting in what looked like an office American flag on the wall behind him, a coffee mug in his hand that read, "World's Okayest Veteran." "You look like hell," Danny said. "Thanks." "I mean it. When's the last time you slept?" "Define sleep." Danny took a sip of his coffee. "You said nightfall. Talk to me." Jack took a breath. "Thomas Kessler is running an operation out of a tech company in Chicago, Shaw Dynamics. He's got a man on the inside, Raymond Voss, the COO, who's been stealing proprietary medical AI technology and selling it through a network of shell companies to foreign buyers. Military applications, surveillance, behavioral manipulation." Danny's face didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Kessler, that son of a bitch." "He's not retired, Danny. He never was. Greystone went underground. He just changed the name and kept going." "How'd you find this?" "I work in the building." "You work in—" Danny stopped. He looked at Jack. "You're the janitor." "Yeah." Danny set his coffee down. He rubbed his face with both hands. "Jack, you absolute lunatic. You've been working as a janitor in a building that Thomas Kessler is systematically looting. I didn't know he was involved until 2 nights ago." "But you know now." "I know now." Danny leaned back in his chair. Jack could see him processing, running through the implications the way a tactical mind does threat assessment, resource allocation, risk analysis. "Nightfall," Danny said slowly. "Mitchell Briggs and Donahue, the bad intel that came from Greystone, the ambush, the cover-up afterward." He paused. "You think this is connected?" "I think Kessler has been doing the same thing for decades. Finding assets, embedding operatives, stripping value, and disappearing before anyone figures it out. Nightfall wasn't an intelligence failure, Danny. It was a business transaction. Kessler traded our team's safety for a weapons deal, and when it went wrong, he buried it." "I know. I've always known." "Then why didn't you do something?" The question hung between them like a blade. Danny's jaw tightened. "Because I tried. 2 years after Nightfall, I filed a formal complaint through channels. It went nowhere. I talked to a congressional aide who was investigating Greystone. 2 weeks later, the investigation was shut down. I contacted a journalist at the Washington Post who was writing about defense contractor misconduct. His editor killed the story." Danny paused. "Kessler has protection, Jack. Serious protection. The kind that comes from having enough dirt on enough powerful people that nobody wants to be the one who pulls the thread. So he just gets away with it. He has so far." Jack clenched his fist under the table. "Not this time." Danny looked at him for a long moment. "What are you planning?" "The CEO of Shaw Dynamics, Catherine Shaw. She knows what Voss is doing. She has evidence. I got into the server room and pulled everything. Financial records, communications contracts, the whole network. But Voss gave her an ultimatum. Sign over control of the company by Friday or he escalates." "Escalates how?" "Based on Kessler's communications, I'm expecting a tactical team, building takeover, forced transfer." Danny let out a low whistle. "In a civilian building downtown Chicago." "Kessler's done it before. You know he has." Danny was quiet. Then he nodded slowly. "He has. But that was overseas. Doing it on U.S. soil in a major metropolitan area, that's a different level of risk. He'd need to be very confident that nobody's going to interfere." High is confident. He thinks Catherine is isolated. No allies, no security, no one willing to stand with her. And as far as he knows, the only wild card in the building is a janitor with a mop bucket. Danny almost smiled. Almost. He doesn't know you. No, he doesn't. Does Catherine know about you? About what you can do? She knows I was in the Navy. She doesn't know the details. She doesn't know about Nightfall. Are you going to tell her? Jack didn't answer immediately. He stared at the screen, at Danny's familiar face, at the flag on the wall behind him. I don't know, he said finally. Right now she doesn't need my history. She needs a plan. Then let's make one. Danny leaned forward. What assets do you have? Myself. The USB drive with the evidence. Catherine's cooperation. Her father's master key card, which gives me access to every room in the building. And whatever you can bring to the table. I can be in Chicago by tonight. Jack felt something shift in his chest. Relief. Gratitude. The old, familiar feeling of knowing someone had your six. Danny, don't. Don't do the thing where you tell me it's not my fight and I should stay out of it. Mitchell, Briggs, and Donahue were my brothers too. If Kessler is behind this, then it became my fight the second you said his name. Jack nodded. He couldn't speak for a moment. When he did, his voice was rough. Thank you. You can thank me by not getting us killed. I'm too old for that. We're the same age. Yeah, but I've aged better. Despite everything, Jack laughed. It was short and dry and genuine, and it felt like the first crack in a wall he had been building for 4 years. They spent the next hour developing the plan. Danny would fly to Chicago Thursday afternoon. He would bring equipment, communications gear, surveillance countermeasures, and a few other items that Jack didn't ask about because he didn't need to. Danny would set up in a hotel near the Shaw Dynamics building and establish an external monitoring position. Jack would brief Catherine on the plan Thursday night during his shift. If Raymond Voss moved on Friday, and Jack was certain they would be ready. One more thing, Danny said before they ended the call. Yeah, Grace, if this goes sideways, I know. Do you have someone who can take care of her? Jack thought about Mrs. Patterson, about her knitting needles and her cookies and the way she looked at Grace like she was her own granddaughter. Yeah, he said, I do. Good. Because whatever happens Friday, you need to know that your daughter is safe. You can't operate if your mind is split. I've seen men hesitate because they were thinking about their families at the wrong moment, and hesitation gets people killed. I'm not going to hesitate. I know you're not. I'm just reminding you why. They ended the call. Jack sat at his kitchen table in the silence of his empty apartment. Grace was at school. The morning light came through the window and fell across the drawing she had made, the house with the yard and the dog and the 2 smiling stick figures. He picked it up and held it in his hands. I'm going to keep you safe, Gracie, he whispered. I promise. It was a promise he intended to keep, even if it cost him everything. Thursday afternoon. Jack did something unusual. He picked Grace up from school early. Are we going somewhere? Grace asked, climbing into the back seat of the old Honda Civic that Jack had bought for $1,200 3 years ago. Ice cream. Grace's eyes went wide. It's Thursday. So, we only do ice cream on Saturdays. I'm changing the rules. You can't just change the rules. I'm your father. I can change any rules I want. Grace considered this. Can I get 2 scoops? You can get 3. Now I know something's wrong. Jack looked at her in the rearview mirror. 9 years old and already sharper than most adults he had known. Rebecca would have been proud. They went to a small ice cream shop on Halsted Street. Grace got 3 scoops cookie dough mint chocolate chip and something called Unicorn Sparkle that was bright purple and tasted like artificial everything. Jack got coffee flavor in a cup and watched his daughter eat with the kind of focused determination that she brought to everything she did. Dad, Grace said between bites. Yeah. You're doing that thing again. What thing? Looking at me like you're trying to memorize my face. Jack's throat tightened. Maybe I just think you've got a good face. That's weird, Dad. Dads are allowed to be weird. Grace licked her spoon. Is this about work? What makes you say that? Because you always get extra nice before something bad happens. Like when you let me stay up late before you told me we were moving to Chicago. Or when you made pancakes that morning before you told me about the goldfish. The goldfish died of natural causes. Dad, he was floating upside down in tap water. You forgot to use the drops. That's technically accurate. Grace put her spoon down. She looked at him with those wide, bright eyes, Rebecca's eyes, and Jack felt something crack open inside his chest. Whatever it is, Grace said, you don't have to tell me, but I'm not a baby. I know when something's going on. Jack reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were small and sticky with ice cream. "You're right," he said. "Something is going on at work. It's complicated and I can't explain all of it. But I need you to know 2 things." "Okay. First, no matter what happens, I love you more than anything in this world. More than ice cream, more than sleep, more than oxygen." "That's 3 things." "You're right. I love you more than math, too." Grace smiled, the gap-toothed smile that was the best thing Jack had ever seen. "Second," Jack said, "if anything ever happens, if I'm late coming home, or if something feels wrong, I need you to listen to Mrs. Patterson. Do what she says. Stay with her. Don't worry about me. Can you do that?" Grace's smile faded slightly. She squeezed his hand. "Is someone trying to hurt you?" "No, nobody's trying to hurt me." "You're lying." "Grace, you do this thing with your jaw when you lie. It goes all tight. Mom used to point it out." Jack stared at his daughter, 9 years old, perceptive beyond her years, reading him like a book. "I'm going to handle it," he said. "That's not a lie. I'm going to handle it and everything is going to be fine." "Promise?" "Promise." Grace held up her pinky. "Pinky promise." Jack hooked his pinky around hers. "Pinky promise." "Those are legally binding, you know." "I know." "Good." Grace picked up her spoon and went back to her ice cream. "Can we get a dog after this is over?" "We'll see." "That means no." "It means we'll see." "It always means no." Jack smiled. But behind the smile, the clock in his head was counting down. 18 hours until Friday. Thursday night, 11 p.m. Jack walked through the lobby of Shaw Dynamics and clocked in like any other night. The security guard at the front desk, a heavy-set man named Phil, who spent most of his shift watching sports highlights on his phone, barely looked up. "Evening, Jack." "Evening, Phil." "Cold one tonight." "Sure is." Jack grabbed his cart and took the elevator to 38. He started his routine: mop, wipe, vacuum, empty. At 11:45 p.m. his phone buzzed. A text from Danny. "In position. Hotel across the street. I can see the building. Got eyes on all 4 street-level entrances. If anyone shows up who shouldn't be here, I'll see them first." Jack typed back. "Copy. Briefing Catherine at 0200. Roger. Stay frosty." Jack almost smiled at that. Stay frosty, the universal sign-off of men who had spent too many nights in too many dangerous places pretending they weren't scared. At 2 a.m., Jack took the elevator to 40 and knocked on Catherine's door. She opened it. She was wearing the same jeans and sweater from last night. Different coffee cups lined up on her desk for this time. She had clearly given up on the pretense of going home. "We need to talk," Jack said. "That's never a good opening." He stepped inside and closed the door. "I talked to my contact. He's in Chicago. He's set up in a monitoring position across the street." Catherine blinked. "Your contact? You mean your military friend?" "Yes, his name is Danny Reeves. He's someone I trust completely. He's been involved in operations like this before." "Operations like what?" "Counterintelligence, asset protection, tactical response." Catherine sat down slowly. "Jack, you're describing military operations. We're talking about a technology company in downtown Chicago." "I know, and I know how it sounds. But Catherine, the people behind Raymond are not corporate raiders. Thomas Kessler is a former intelligence operator who has spent decades infiltrating organizations, stealing their assets and disappearing before anyone can touch him. He uses military-trained personnel. He runs his operations like black ops. And if he decides to escalate tomorrow, this building is going to feel a lot less like an office and a lot more like a combat zone." Catherine was quiet. Jack could see her processing. She was a scientist by training, a person who dealt in data evidence and logical conclusions. What Jack was telling her defied every assumption she had about how the world worked. But the evidence was on the USB drive, and the evidence didn't lie. "What's the plan?" she asked. "Tomorrow, when you come to work, act normal. Go to your meetings. Take your calls. Don't do anything that suggests you know what's coming. Raymond will be watching you. If he suspects you're preparing for something, he'll adjust his timeline." "And then what?" "Danny and I will be in position by noon. If Voss moves when Voss moves, we'll be ready. Danny will be monitoring from outside. I'll be inside the building." "As the janitor?" "As whatever I need to be." Catherine looked at him for a long time. "How many men do you think they'll bring?" "Based on the communications I read, Kessler typically deploys teams of 4 to 6. They'll come in through the side entrance, the one with the bypassed alarm, and use the service elevator to reach the executive floors. They'll lock down the floor-disabled communications and secure you in a controlled environment. The whole thing will be designed to look like an internal security response to a perceived threat. How do you stop 6 armed men? You don't stop them. You redirect them. You control the environment. You take away their advantages and create your own. That sounds like something out of a textbook. It is, the textbook I trained with. Catherine stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the city. The lights of Chicago stretched out below them like a circuit board. My father used to stand at this window, she said softly. He'd look out at the city and say, everything we build here will outlast us. That's the point. He wasn't talking about money. He wasn't talking about stock prices. He was talking about the technology, about the possibility of saving lives. She turned to face Jack. I'm not going to let them take it. I don't care how many men they send. I don't care how dangerous Thomas Kessler is. This is my father's company, and I will burn it to the ground before I hand it over to people who want to turn it into a weapon. Jack looked at her. This woman who should have been terrified, who was outgunned and outmaneuvered and running on caffeine and fury, and he saw something that he recognized at the deepest level of his being. Courage. Not the absence of fear, the decision to act despite it. He had seen it in soldiers, in teammates, in the men whose faces stared out at him from the photograph in his duffel bag. And now he saw it in Catherine Shaw, standing in her dead father's office at 2 a.m., refusing to break. You remind me of someone, Jack said, a man named Mitchell. He was on my team, before. Was he brave? I was terrified, every single mission, but he never let it stop him. He used to say being brave isn't about not being scared, it's about being scared and showing up anyway. Smart man. The best I ever knew. What happened to him? Jack was quiet for a long time. He showed up, Jack said finally. One last time. Catherine held his gaze. She didn't ask anything else. She understood. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow. Jack left her office and went back to pushing his cart through the empty hallways of Shaw Dynamics. The building was quiet, the floors were clean, the cameras recorded a janitor doing his job, but beneath the surface everything had changed. The pieces were in motion, the clock was ticking, and in less than 12 hours, the invisible man who had spent 4 years hiding from the world was going to step into the light. Jack finished his shift at 5 a.m. He walked home in the pre-dawn darkness, the cold Chicago air burning his lungs. He climbed the stairs to his apartment. He opened the door. Mrs. Patterson was asleep in the armchair, her knitting in her lap. Grace was curled up on the couch under a blanket, a book open on her chest. Jack stood in the doorway and looked at them. His daughter, the woman who had become their family. He walked to the closet. He opened the duffel bag. He took out the tactical vest and the night vision monoculars and laid them on the bed beside the surveillance kit he had already used in the server room. Then he reached into the bag one more time and pulled out the photograph. 6 men in the desert, smiling. Brothers, 3 dead, 1 missing, 1 on his way to Chicago, and 1 standing in a small apartment preparing to fight again. Jack set the photograph on the nightstand next to his bed. He looked at the faces of the men he had loved and lost. I'm not running anymore, he told them. Then he lay down on the bed fully clothed and closed his eyes. He didn't sleep. But for the first time in 4 years, it wasn't because of nightmares. It was because he was ready. Friday morning arrived the way all dangerous days arrive quietly. Jack's eyes opened at 7 a.m. He hadn't slept. His body had been still for 2 hours, but his mind had been running tactical simulations the entire time, turning over variables, testing scenarios, probing for weaknesses in his own plan, the way an enemy would. He got up. He splashed water on his face. He looked in the mirror. The man staring back at him was someone he hadn't seen in 4 years. The jaw was set. The eyes were focused. The softness that civilian life had layered over his features, the harmless expression, the downward gaze, the deliberate dullness was gone. What was left underneath was sharp, hard, and fully awake. Jack Mercer, the janitor, was disappearing, and the man he used to be was coming back. Maimata Grace breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. She came out of her room in her school uniform with her backpack already on, hair pulled back in the ponytail he had learned to do from YouTube. You're up early, Grace said, sliding into her chair. Couldn't sleep. Bad dreams. No dreams at all. Grace studied him while she ate. She did that thing again, the quiet evaluation, the processing behind her eyes that made her seem decades older than 9. "You look different today," she said. "Different how?" "I don't know, like you're standing up straighter." Jack poured her orange juice. "Maybe I finally fixed my posture. Mrs. Patterson says posture reflects intention." Mrs. Patterson is a very philosophical woman. "She also says you carry too much weight on your shoulders and it's not because of the mop." Jack set the juice in front of her. He sat down across the table and looked at his daughter. "Gracie, I need to tell you something." She put her fork down. "Okay. Tonight might be a late night for me, later than usual. I need you to stay with Mrs. Patterson, and I need you to do exactly what she says. No arguments, no negotiating, no lawyer tactics." "I don't do lawyer tactics." "You negotiated your bedtime from 8:30 to 9:15 using a PowerPoint presentation." "That was a persuasive essay with visual aids. Different thing." Jack almost smiled, almost. But the weight of what was coming pressed down on him too hard. "Promise me, Gracie." She looked at him. The playfulness drained from her face. She reached across the table and took his hand. "I promise, Dad." "Good girl. But you have to promise me something too." "What?" "Come home." The words hit Jack like a punch. Simple, direct. A 9-year-old cutting through all the tactical planning and military strategy and getting to the only thing that mattered. "I'll come home," he said. "Pinky promise." He hooked his pinky around hers for the second time in 2 days. "Pinky promise." Grace squeezed his finger, picked up her fork, and went back to her eggs like nothing had happened. But Jack saw her hand trembling slightly, and he knew that she understood more than she was letting on. He walked her to school. He hugged her at the gate longer than usual. She didn't pull away. "Love you, Dad." "Love you more." Not possible. She disappeared through the school doors. Jack stood on the sidewalk and watched her go, and he felt something tear inside him. The quiet, private agony of a parent who isn't sure he's making the right choice, but knows he can't make a different one. Then he turned and walked back to his apartment. He called Danny at 9 a.m. "Talk to me," Jack said. "I'm set up on the 14th floor of the Marquette Hotel, direct sightline to the Shaw Dynamics building. I can see the main entrance, the south side entrance, the one with the bypassed alarm and the parking garage ramp." "Anything moving?" "Not yet. Normal foot traffic, employees coming in for work, no unusual vehicles, no tactical signatures. They won't come during business hours, too many witnesses. My guess is they'll wait until the building clears out, late afternoon or early evening. Rush hour gives them cover for the approach, and a half-empty building gives them operational space." "Agreed. I've got eyes on the parking garage. If they stage vehicles, I'll see them. Comms. I've got a set of encrypted earpieces. Old school. No digital signature. I'll drop one with the front desk at Shaw Dynamics and a package addressed to you. Pick it up when you clock in." "Copy." Jack. "Yeah. If this goes loud, if they bring weapons into that building and it becomes a kinetic situation, we need rules of engagement. This isn't overseas. This is a civilian building in a U.S. city. If someone gets hurt, there will be an investigation. There will be consequences." "I know. So what are the rules?" Jack was quiet for a moment. "Minimum force. Neutralize without escalation. No lethal contact unless lives are in immediate danger. And if lives are in immediate danger, then I do what I was trained to do." Danny was silent for a beat. "Roger that. Stay frosty, brother." "Stay frosty." Jack hung up. He sat in his apartment for a long time, staring at the tactical vest on his bed. Then he got up, put the vest into a gym bag, along with the earpiece pickup instructions, the surveillance kit, and a few other items. He zipped the bag closed and slid it under the bed. He would pick it up on his way to work. At 2 p.m., Jack went to Mrs. Patterson's apartment and knocked on her door. She answered with a dish towel over her shoulder and flour on her hands. "I'm baking," she said. "Snickerdoodles." "Mrs. Patterson, I need to ask you something important." "Come in. You look like you need a cookie." "I need you to keep Grace tonight, all night, maybe into tomorrow morning." Mrs. Patterson stopped wiping her hands. She looked at him carefully. "That's a longer shift than usual." "Yes, ma'am." "Is this about whatever's been eating at you all week?" "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Patterson set the dish towel down. She walked to her kitchen table and sat down. Then she pointed at the chair across from her. "Sit." Jack sat. "I'm going to say something and you're going to listen," Mrs. Patterson said. Her voice was different now, not the warm, grandmotherly tone she used with Grace. Something harder, something that reminded Jack strangely of his commanding officer from Bud's. "I've known you for 4 years, Jack Mercer. In that time, you've been the best father I've ever seen. You work nights, you raise that girl alone, and you never once complained. Not once. But I'm not blind and I'm not stupid. You're not just a janitor. I've known that since the first week. Jack stared at her. How? Because janitors don't walk the way you walk. They don't scan a room the way you scan a room. They don't position themselves with their backs to walls and their faces toward doors. My husband Harold was Army. 22 years. He walked the same way. Jack said nothing. I don't need to know what you did before, Mrs. Patterson continued. I don't need to know what's happening tonight, but I need you to know that whatever it is, Grace will be safe with me. I will lock this door, I will pull the curtains, and that child will not leave my sight until you walk back through that door yourself. Do you understand me? Yes, ma'am. Good. Now eat a cookie. You're too thin. Jack took a snickerdoodle from the plate she pushed toward him. It was warm. It tasted like home. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. Don't thank me. Just come back in one piece. That girl needs her father more than whatever's out there needs you. I know. Then act like it. Jack finished the cookie, stood up, and walked to the door. He paused. Harold was a lucky man, he said. Mrs. Patterson's eyes softened. Just for a moment. He certainly was. Now get out of my kitchen. I've got 12 more cookies to bake, and you're making me emotional. Jack left. He picked up Grace from school at 3:15. They walked home together. She told him about a math test she was pretty sure she aced, and a girl named Olivia who had accidentally glued her hand to the desk during art class. Jack listened to every word. He stored every detail. He memorized the sound of her laugh, and the way she skipped over cracks in the sidewalk, and the way she held his hand without thinking about it, like it was the most natural thing in the world. At 5 p.m. he took her to Mrs. Patterson's apartment. Snickerdoodles, Grace said when she smelled the cookies. Made them just for you, Mrs. Patterson said, winking at Jack. Now come on in. I've got a new puzzle, 1,000 pieces. It's a picture of a castle. Grace ran inside. Jack stood in the doorway. Dad, Grace called from the kitchen. Aren't you going to stay? I've got to get to work, Gracie. She came back to the doorway. She looked up at him. Remember what you promised. I remember. She hugged him. Hard. He hugged her back. He closed his eyes and breathed in the smell of her hair, strawberry shampoo, and for a moment the whole world was reduced to this single point of contact, this one fragile, precious connection that made everything else worth fighting for. I love you, Gracie. Love you more, Dad. Not possible. She let go. She went back to Mrs. Patterson's kitchen. The door closed. Jack stood in the hallway alone. Then he went back to his apartment, pulled the gym bag from under the bed, and got ready. Jack arrived at Shaw Dynamics at 9:30 p.m., 30 minutes before his official shift. He signed in at the front desk. Phil, the security guard, was watching a basketball recap. You're early, Phil said. Figured I'd get a head start. Dedicated. That's what I like about you, Jack. Jack collected the package. Danny had left a small brown envelope marked with his name. Inside was a wireless earpiece, smaller than a dime. He slipped it into his ear as he walked to the elevator. Danny, you copy? Danny's voice crackled in his ear, clear and steady. Loud and clear. I've got eyes on the building. How's it looking inside? Normal so far. Lobby security is Phil. One guy. He's watching basketball. Fantastic. What about Catherine? She should be on 40. I told her to stay in her office and wait. Copy. Jack, I've got movement on the south side. Jack stopped walking. Talk to me. Black SUV, tinted windows, just pulled into the parking garage. It's followed by a second vehicle, gray van, no markings. They didn't use the main entrance. They went straight for the lower level. Jack checked his watch. 9:42 p.m. Earlier than he expected. They weren't waiting for the building to empty. They were moving now while there were still enough employees leaving to provide cover for their entry. How many people? Jack asked. Can't tell yet. The SUV has hold on. A pause. 4 men just exited the SUV, dark clothing. 2 of them are carrying equipment bags. The other 2 are moving toward the south entrance. The bypassed alarm. Affirmative. And Jack, 2 more men just came out of the van. 6 total. They're splitting up. 2 going to the south entrance, 2 heading for the service elevator, and 2 staying with the vehicles. 6 men. That's what I expected. 4 going in, 2 staying behind as extraction. Classic Kessler playbook. Jack's jaw tightened. His heart rate, which had been steady all day, kicked up exactly 3 beats per minute. A controlled increase, an operational increase. I was in mission mode. Danny, I need you to monitor the exits. If anyone tries to leave the building in a hurry, especially Catherine, I need to know. Roger. And if things go sideways in there, I call the police. No, not yet. Police show up. Kessler's lawyers turn this into a misunderstanding, a security drill, a false alarm. These men will be gone before the first squad car arrives, and all the evidence disappears with them. Then what? Give me 20 minutes. If you don't hear from me in 20 minutes, then call everyone. Police, FBI, the National Guard, CNN, anyone with a badge or a camera. 20 minutes. Copy. Jack moved. He bypassed the elevator and took the stairs. He climbed from the lobby to the 38th floor without stopping 38 flights in just under 4 minutes. His breathing was elevated but controlled. The gym bag was on his back. His footsteps were silent. On 38, he ducked into the supply closet and changed. He pulled on the tactical vest under a dark jacket. He fitted the night vision monocular to his belt. He checked the surveillance scanner. Then he sent a text to Catherine. They're here. Stay in your office. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me. Her response came in 3 seconds. How many? 4 inside, 2 outside. I'm not hiding, Jack. You're not hiding. You're holding position. There's a difference. A long pause. Then fine. But if Raymond walks through that door, I'm not going quietly. Jack pocketed his phone and moved to the stairwell. He climbed to 39 and pressed his ear to the door. Footsteps, 2 sets, moving fast but not running. Tactical pace, the speed of men who knew where they were going and didn't expect resistance. Jack waited. The footsteps passed the stairwell door and continued down the hallway toward the server room. He opened the door 6 inches and looked. 2 men. Both wearing dark tactical clothing under civilian jackets, both carrying sidearms and hip holsters. One had a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. The other carried what looked like a signal jamming device, a portable unit that could kill cell phone reception and Wi-Fi throughout the floor. They were heading for the server room. Their job was to access the remaining data, download whatever Raymond needed, and then jam communications on the executive floors, so Catherine couldn't call for help. The other 2 men would be heading up to 40. To Catherine. Jack made a decision. He could take the 2 on 39 first, remove the communication threat, then move up to 40. Or he could go straight to 40 and protect Catherine. He chose 39. Catherine was behind a locked door. She had maybe 5 minutes before the second team reached her. Jack could clear 39 in 3. He stepped into the hallway. The 2 men were 20 feet ahead of him, their backs turned, moving toward the server room. Jack closed the distance in 4 seconds. The first man didn't hear him, didn't feel him. One moment he was reaching for the server room keypad, and the next moment a hand was on the back of his neck and his face was meeting the wall with a controlled, precise impact that knocked him unconscious without breaking bone. He went down like a bag of wet sand. The second man turned. He was fast-trained, the kind of reflexes that came from military or paramilitary background. His hand went to his hip. His fingers closed around the grip of his pistol. He got it halfway out of the holster. Jack hit him in the solar plexus with a palm strike that drove every molecule of air out of his lungs. The man doubled over, gasping. Jack caught the pistol as it fell from his hand, ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and tossed the weapon down the hall in one fluid motion. Then he applied a chokehold, not a lethal one, but the kind that restricted blood flow to the brain just enough to induce unconsciousness in 8 seconds. The man fought. He clawed at Jack's arms. He tried to kick. He made a strangled sound that echoed off the tile walls. 8 seconds later, he went limp. Jack lowered him to the floor. He checked pulses on both men. Strong, steady. They'd be out for 10 to 15 minutes. He grabbed the signal jammer and crushed it under his boot. Then he took both men's phones, removed the batteries, and tossed them into the supply closet. He zip-tied their wrists behind their backs, using cable ties from his vest. Total elapsed time 2 minutes and 41 seconds. Danny, Jack said into his earpiece. 2 down on 39. Server team neutralized. Moving to 40. Copy. The other 2 entered the service elevator 90 seconds ago. They should be approaching 40 now. How long? They're there, Jack. They're already on the floor. Jack ran. He hit the stairwell and took the steps 3 at a time. 1 flight, 12 seconds. He pushed through the door onto 40 and stopped. The hallway was dimly lit. Emergency lighting only. Someone had killed the main power to this floor. Jack pulled the night vision monocular from his belt and held it to his right eye. The hallway lit up in shades of green and gray. empty. He moved forward, hugging the right wall. Catherine's office was at the end of the hall, past the executive conference room and two smaller meeting rooms. The conference room door was open. Jack stopped beside it and listened. Voices. Raymond Voss. Calm. Controlled. The same smooth tone Jack had heard through Catherine's office door 4 nights ago. And Catherine. I told you, Raymond, I'm not signing anything. Catherine, let's be reasonable. The situation has changed. You're alone in this building. Your phones don't work. Your security is compromised. There's nobody coming to help you. Then why do you need 2 men with guns to make your case? Jack peered around the doorframe. The conference room was dark, except for the glow of a single laptop on the table. Raymond Voss stood at one end wearing an impeccable suit, his hands in his pockets, looking like a man conducting a routine board meeting rather than a hostile takeover. Catherine stood at the other end. Her back was against the wall, not cowering standing. Her chin was up, her shoulders were squared. Between them 2 men, both armed. One stood near the door Jack's side, the other was positioned behind Catherine, cutting off her exit. Raymond smiled. The guns are a precaution, Catherine, nothing more. Nobody wants violence, I certainly don't. All I need is your signature on a document that will make both of us very wealthy and put this entire unpleasant situation behind us. You're stealing my company. I'm restructuring it. There's a difference. The hell there is. Raymond sighed. He pulled a document from his jacket and placed it on the table. Sign this. Step down. Walk away with $50 million, and the satisfaction of knowing your father's technology will be developed to its full potential. Its full potential? You mean selling it to defense contractors and surveillance firms? You mean letting Thomas Kessler turn it into a weapon? Something shifted in Raymond's face. The calm mask cracked just slightly. How do you know that name? I know a lot of things, Raymond. Things you didn't think I knew. Things that would make your investors very nervous and your lawyers very busy. Raymond's eyes narrowed. He studied Catherine with a new intensity, like a chess player who had just realized his opponent had made a move he didn't anticipate. Who have you been talking to? He asked softly. Does it matter? It matters a great deal. Raymond stepped closer to the table. His voice dropped. Catherine, you need to understand something. Thomas Kessler is not a man you want as an enemy. The people he works with, the resources he has, you have no idea what you're dealing with. I'm trying to give you an exit. A clean, painless exit. If Kessler has to handle this himself... Raymond paused. He won't be as generous. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Catherine looked at him. Jack could see her face in the green glow of his monocular. She was terrified. He could see it in the way her hands pressed flat against the wall behind her, in the slight tremor in her lower lip, in the rapid pulse visible at her throat. But she didn't break. My father built this company to save lives, she said, and her voice was steady, even if her body wasn't. He spent 30 years developing technology that could diagnose diseases earlier, treat patients faster, and give doctors tools that didn't exist before. And you want to take that and sell it to people who will use it to hurt people, to control people, to weaponize their own biology against them. Your father was an idealist. My father was a hero. Your father was a fool who couldn't see the commercial potential of his own work, and you're making the same mistake. Catherine's eyes flashed. Get out of my building. Raymond shook his head slowly. He turned to the man nearest Catherine and nodded. The man grabbed Catherine's arm. She pulled away. He grabbed her again harder and forced her toward the table where the document lay open. Sign it, Raymond said. His voice was flat now. No more pretense, no more politeness. Sign it or this gets significantly worse for you. Let go of me. Sign the document, Catherine. I said let go of me. The man shoved her into a chair. He held her shoulder down with one hand, while the other pushed a pen toward her. Jack stepped into the conference room. He pushed the cleaning cart in front of him. The wheels squeaked against the carpet. The sound was so mundane, so absurdly ordinary, that every head in the room turned toward it. A janitor, gray uniform, name tag, mop bucket. The armed man by the door stared at him. Raymond's eyebrows rose slightly. The man holding Catherine's shoulder didn't even bother to look. He just called over his shoulder, "Get out! Wrong room!" Jack stopped the cart. He looked at Raymond. "Evening, Mr. Voss?" Raymond frowned. "Who are you?" "Jack Mercer, night janitor, floors 38 through 40. Raymond stared at him for 2 seconds. Then he waved a hand dismissively. "Get out. This is a private meeting." "Doesn't look like a meeting to me," Jack said. "Meetings usually don't involve holding someone in a chair against their will." Raymond's face hardened. He looked at the armed man by the door. "Remove him." The man stepped toward Jack. Howe was big, 6'3", 220, with the build of someone who had spent years in a gym and probably several more years in a conflict zone. He reached for Jack's arm with the confidence of a man who had never encountered serious resistance from someone in a janitor's uniform. His hand never made contact. Jack redirected the grab, locked the man's wrist, and rotated it 90 degrees in a motion so fast and precise that the man's brain didn't register what was happening until he was already on his knees. Jack applied pressure to the joint, not enough to break it, but enough to send a white-hot signal through the man's nervous system that said, "Stop moving or this gets permanent." The man gasped. His free hand went for his holster. Jack kicked the holster strap loose and stripped the weapon before the man's fingers closed on it. He dropped the magazine, cleared the round, and set the empty gun on the cleaning cart, like he was putting away a bottle of window cleaner. Then he released the wrist lock and drove a short, controlled strike into the side of the man's neck, hitting the vagus nerve with surgical accuracy. The man's eyes rolled back. He collapsed sideways and hit the carpet without a sound. Total elapsed time 4 seconds. The room went dead silent. Raymond's mouth was open. The second armed man, the one who had been holding Catherine, released her shoulder and took a step back, his hand going to his weapon. "Don't," Jack said. The word was quiet, almost conversational. But the way he said it, the absolute unmistakable authority in that single syllable, froze the man in place. Jack looked at him. The man looked back. They held each other's gaze for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. The man was trained. Jack could see it. He was calculating odds, measuring distances, trying to determine whether he could draw and fire before the janitor closed the gap. "I can see you doing the math," Jack said. "Let me save you the trouble. You're 4 feet from the woman you were assaulting. I'm 12 feet from you. Your weapon is holstered with the retention strap still engaged. In the time it takes you to clear that strap, draw, acquire a target, and fire, I will have crossed the distance and put you on the floor next to your friend." He paused. "Those aren't good odds." The man's hand hovered near his holster. His jaw was tight. Sweat appeared on his forehead. "Your call," Jack said. 3 seconds passed. Then the man slowly raised both hands away from his body. "Smart," Jack said. "On the ground, face down, hands behind your back." The man complied. Jack zip-tied his wrists with the same cable ties he had used on 39. Raymond Voss hadn't moved. He was staring at Jack with an expression that Jack had seen many times before, the expression of a man whose entire understanding of a situation had just been demolished in 15 seconds. "Who?" Raymond started. "Sit down, Mr. Voss." "You can't sit down." Raymond sat. His hands were trembling. The smooth, confident COO who had threatened Catherine with the casual certainty of a man who held all the cards was gone. In his place was a frightened executive who had just watched a janitor dismantle 2 trained operatives the way a mechanic disassembles an engine. Catherine stood up from the chair where she had been forced to sit. She was shaking. Her eyes were wide. She looked at the 2 unconscious men on the floor, then at the empty weapon sitting on the cleaning cart, then at Jack. "Oh my God," she whispered. Jack turned to her. His expression softened just slightly, just enough to let her know that the danger for the moment was under control. "You okay?" he asked. Yes, I think so." She pressed her hand to her chest. "Jack, how did you—" "Later." He turned back to Raymond. "Danny's status." Danny's voice crackled in his earpiece. 2 men still at the vehicles in the parking garage. No movement. They're holding position." "Copy. Keep eyes on them. If they move, I need to know immediately." Raymond's head snapped up. "Who are you talking to? Who else is involved?" Jack ignored him. He pulled out a chair across from Raymond and sat down. For a moment, the 2 men faced each other across the conference table. The document Raymond had brought, the restructuring agreement, lay between them like an unexploded bomb. "Here's what's going to happen, Raymond," Jack said. "You're going to answer every question I ask. You're going to tell me everything about your arrangement with Thomas Kessler. The financial structure, the buyer network, the communications protocol, everything. And you're going to do it voluntarily, clearly, and without wasting my time. I want a lawyer. This isn't an arrest. I'm not a cop. You don't get a lawyer." "Then who the hell are you?" Jack looked at him steadily. I'm the janitor on floors 38 through 40. Janitors don't do what you just did. This one does. Raymond swallowed. His eyes darted to Catherine, then to the unconscious men, then back to Jack. You don't understand, Raymond said, and now his voice was different, higher, faster, with the sharp edge of a man who was beginning to realize that his safety net had just been cut away. Kessler is not someone you can fight. He has connections everywhere. Government, military, intelligence agencies. If you interfere with his operation, he will destroy you. He'll destroy everyone you care about. He's already tried, Jack said. 7 years ago. He sent my team into an ambush using bad intelligence from Greystone Analytics. 3 men died. Good men, brothers. And Kessler walked away without a scratch. Raymond's face went white. You're one of the Nightfall operators. The name landed in the room like a grenade. Catherine looked at Jack. Nightfall. Jack kept his eyes on Raymond. You know about Nightfall. Kessler told me. He told me about the mission. He said it was a necessary sacrifice, that the intelligence trade required a necessary sacrifice. Jack's voice was very quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded earthquakes. 3 men died because Kessler sold targeting data to a weapons dealer in exchange for a procurement contract. He knew the intelligence was compromised. He sent us anyway. And when we walked into that ambush, he was already on a plane back to Washington. Raymond's hands were shaking now, violently. I didn't know about that when I started working with him, I swear. He approached me 3 years ago. He said he had buyers for the medical AI technology. He said we could make hundreds of millions. He said nobody would get hurt. Nobody would get hurt, Jack repeated. I'm not a violent man. I'm a businessman. The gun's the tactical team that was Kessler's idea. He said Catherine needed to be persuaded, and You brought armed men into a civilian building to force a woman to sign away her dead father's legacy, and you're telling me you're not a violent man. Raymond looked like he was going to be sick. I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this. It was supposed to be clean, corporate, legal. It stopped being legal the moment you made your first offshore transfer, Catherine said. She was standing behind Jack now, her arms crossed, her voice cold. $47 million, Raymond. That's what I found. But the real number is $320 million, isn't it? Raymond's head dropped. He stared at the table. Yes. And the buyers, the Chinese pharmaceutical company, the London intelligence firm, Greystone's successor network. You sold my father's technology to all of them. Yes. Technology designed to save lives. Yes. Catherine stepped forward. My father died thinking he failed. He died thinking the company was falling apart because of something he did wrong. But it was you. It was you the whole time. Raymond wouldn't look at her. I'm sorry. You're not sorry. You're scared. There's a difference. She was right. Jack could see it. Raymond Voss was not a man experiencing guilt. He was a man experiencing the sudden, terrifying realization that the walls he had built around himself were gone, and the consequences he had never imagined were standing right in front of him in a janitor's uniform. Danny, Jack said, call it in. Police or FBI? Both. And get me a number for the Securities and Exchange Commission while you're at it. Already on it, brother. Raymond looked up. Panic was spreading across his face like a crack in ice. You can't do this. If you bring in the authorities, Kessler will know. He has people inside every agency. He'll disappear before they can touch him, and he'll come after you. He'll come after everyone connected to this. Let him try, Jack said. You don't understand. He's already watching. He knows about tonight. He'll know it's failed, and when he finds out who stopped it, then he'll find me, Jack said, and we'll have a conversation about what happened at Nightfall. Raymond shook his head. You're a dead man. You know that, right, you and your daughter. He'll find out about your daughter. The room went cold. Jack leaned across the table. His face was inches from Raymond's, and for the first time that night the controlled, precise, professional demeanor cracked just enough for Raymond to see what was underneath. Not a janitor, not even a soldier, something older, something more primal. A father's rage compressed and channeled through 14 years of the most elite military training on Earth. If anyone, Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper, touches my daughter, I will not call the police. I will not call the FBI. I will not involve lawyers or courts or any institution that operates within the boundaries of civilized society. I will come for them myself, and what I do will make Nightfall look like a training exercise. Raymond stopped breathing. Do you understand me? Jack asked. Raymond nodded. It was a very small nod, the nod of a man who had just looked into an abyss and realized it was looking back. Jack sat back in his chair. The room was quiet, except for the low groaning of one of the unconscious men starting to regain consciousness on the floor. Catherine put her hand on Jack's shoulder. He felt the weight of it, not heavy, not light, steady, present, the touch of someone who was no longer standing alone. "Thank you," she said. Jack looked up at her, the woman who had inherited her father's company and her father's fight, the woman who had refused to break when every force in the world was trying to shatter her. "My name is Jack Mercer," he said. "I'm the janitor on floors 38 through 40. A pause. "And before that, I was a Navy SEAL." Catherine looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something Jack didn't expect. She smiled. "I know," she said. "I've known since you told me about the camera angles. Then why did you let me keep pretending? Because you needed to decide for yourself when to stop." Jack held her gaze. Something passed between them, an understanding that had nothing to do with words and everything to do with the kind of trust that only forms when two people have walked through fire together. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Danny's voice came through the earpiece. "Cavalry's coming, brother. Police, FBI, and I threw in a news van for good measure. The two guys at the vehicles are trying to leave. Chicago PD is cutting them off at the garage exit." Jack stood up. He looked around the conference room at Raymond Voss, sitting in his chair with the face of a man whose empire had just collapsed, at the two bound operatives on the floor at the cleaning cart, still parked by the door with an empty pistol sitting on top of it, next to a spray bottle of Windex. He had walked into this room as a janitor. He was walking out as something else entirely. But the man he was walking out, as the man who had fought and bled and carried scars that nobody could see, that man had always been there. Underneath the gray uniform, behind the mop and the cleaning cart, and 4 years of practiced invisibility. Waiting, not to be discovered, but to choose. Jack Mercer had finally made his choice. The sirens got louder. Jack stood in the conference room and waited. Raymond Voss hadn't moved from his chair. His hands were flat on the table, fingers spread wide like a man trying to hold on to something that had already slipped away. The two operatives on the floor were conscious now, zip-tied and silent, staring at the carpet, with the blank resignation of men who understood that their night was over. Catherine was on her phone. The cell signal had returned the moment Jack destroyed the jammer on 39. She was calling her personal attorney, her voice low and rapid, delivering instructions, with the precision of a woman who had spent her entire career making decisions under pressure. Jack's earpiece crackled. "FBI just pulled up," Danny said. 4 vehicles. They're coming in through the main entrance. Chicago PD has the parking garage locked down. The 2 extraction guys are in custody." "Copy." "Jack, one more thing. A black sedan pulled away from the east side of the building about 6 minutes ago, right when the sirens started. 1 occupant. I couldn't get a plate, but the timing is suspicious." Jack's jaw tightened. "Kessler." "That's my guess. He was watching. He saw it fall apart and he ran." "He won't run far." "No, he won't. But right now he's gone." Jack filed that information away. Kessler was a problem for later. Right now the immediate situation needed to be secured. The FBI arrived on the 40th floor 7 minutes later. 4 agents in tactical vests, weapons drawn, moving through the hallway, with the careful efficiency of people who had trained for exactly this kind of scenario. The lead agent was a woman in her 40s, short dark hair, sharp eyes, a voice that carried the kind of authority that came from years of earning it. "FBI, nobody moves." Jack raised his hands. Catherine put her phone down. Raymond didn't react at all. He just sat there staring at the table, looking like a man who had already left his own body. The lead agent swept the room, assessed the 2 restrained operatives on the floor, the empty weapon on the cleaning cart, and the janitor standing in the middle of it all with his hands up and a tactical vest under his jacket. "Who's in charge here?" she asked. "I am," Catherine said, stepping forward. "Catherine Shaw, CEO of Shaw Dynamics. This is my building. These men broke in tonight with armed personnel to force me to sign over control of my company." The agent looked at Catherine, then at Raymond, then at Jack. "And you are?" "Jack Mercer, night janitor." The agent stared at him. Her eyes dropped to the tactical vest, then back to his face. "That's a hell of a uniform for a janitor." "I accessorize." The agent didn't smile. We're going to need statements from everyone. This floor is now a federal crime scene. Nobody leaves until we've processed the area." "Understood," Jack said, "but there's something you need to see first." He pulled the encrypted USB drive from his vest pocket and held it out. This contains financial records, encrypted communications, and contractual evidence of a multi-year operation to steal proprietary technology from Shaw Dynamics and sell it to foreign buyers through a network of shell companies. The operation was run by a man named Thomas Kessler, former CEO of Greystone Analytics. Raymond Voss was his inside man. The agent took the USB drive carefully, like it might detonate. "How did you obtain this?" "From the company's own server room, with authorization from the CEO." Catherine nodded. "I authorized it." The agent looked between them. Jack could see her processing the janitor with the tactical vest, the CEO backing his story, the unconscious operatives, the COO, who looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. "Greystone Analytics," the agent said slowly. "That name came up in a congressional investigation 4 years ago. The case was closed." "The case was killed," Jack said. "There's a difference. Kessler had it shut down. He has contacts inside multiple agencies. I don't know how deep they go, but I know they exist." The agent's expression hardened. "Are you suggesting federal agents are compromised?" "I'm suggesting you be very careful about who sees that USB drive." A long silence. The agent held Jack's gaze. He held hers. Two people measuring each other across a divide of trust that neither of them could afford to cross blindly. "I'll handle the evidence personally," she said finally. "Special Agent Diana Ortiz, Counterintelligence Division." "Then Kessler is already on your radar." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Counterintelligence doesn't show up for a corporate break-in. Someone flagged this before you got the call." Agent Ortiz studied him for another long moment. Then she turned to her team. "Secure the floor, get these two into custody, and get me a forensic tech up here. I want the server room on 39 sealed and cataloged." The next 3 hours were a blur of statements, photographs, and procedural formality. Jack sat in a small office on the 38th floor and answered questions from 2 FBI agents who clearly didn't know what to make of him. A janitor who had single-handedly neutralized 4 armed operatives wasn't a scenario their training had covered. He told them what they needed to know. He didn't tell them everything. "I didn't mention Nightfall. Not yet. That was a card he was holding for the right moment, and the right moment hadn't arrived." At 3 a.m., Agent Ortiz pulled him aside. "Your background check came back," she said, and it's mostly redacted. 14 years of military service, the last 8 of which are classified at a level I don't have access to. Your discharge papers say honorable, and everything else says contact JSOC for further information." "That sounds about right." "Mr. Mercer, I've been doing this for 16 years. I've worked cases involving defense contractors, intelligence operatives, and people who exist in the spaces between agencies. I know when someone is more than they appear." She paused. "You're considerably more than you appear." "I'm a janitor who had a busy night." "You're a former Tier 1 operator who just dismantled a covert operation that my division has been trying to get traction on for 3 years. Jack looked at her. 3 years. Thomas Kessler has been a person of interest since Greystone was officially dissolved. We knew he didn't retire. We knew he was still operating. But every time we got close, the investigation hit a wall. Funding got cut. Witnesses went silent. Evidence disappeared. Because he has people inside? Because he has people everywhere. And until tonight, we didn't have enough to move on him." She held up the USB drive. "This changes things. If even half of what's on here is verifiable, it's enough for warrants, indictments, and a very uncomfortable conversation for some very powerful people. Can you protect it? The evidence." "I can, and I will. But I need you to understand something, Mr. Mercer. When Kessler finds out what happened tonight, and he will probably by morning, he's going to respond. He's going to try to discredit the evidence, intimidate witnesses, and eliminate anyone who poses a threat to his operation." "I know. That includes you. And it includes Ms. Shaw." "I know that too." Agent Ortiz studied him. "You're not afraid." "I'm terrified, but that's never stopped me before." She almost smiled. "I'll be in touch, Mr. Mercer. Don't leave the city." "I've got a shift on Monday. I'm not going anywhere." Ortiz walked away. Jack watched her go, carrying the USB drive that contained $320 million worth of stolen secrets and the potential to bring down a man who had been operating above the law for decades. It was 4 a.m. when Jack finally left the building. Danny was waiting for him on the sidewalk across the street. He was leaning against a lamppost, hands in his pockets, looking like a man who had just watched an entire military operation unfold from a hotel window and was now processing the fact that his best friend had done most of the heavy lifting in a janitor's uniform. "You good?" Danny asked. "I'm good. The 4 inside. FBI has them. Raymond Voss is in custody. He's cooperating." "Already?" "He's scared. Kessler hung him out to dry. The moment things went wrong, Kessler disappeared and left Raymond holding the bag. Raymond knows what that means." Danny nodded slowly. "Classic Kessler. Use them up, throw them away. Just like nightfall." They stood there in the cold Chicago air, two men who had spent the best years of their lives serving a country that had sometimes failed to serve them back. The city hummed around them, distant traffic, a siren fading somewhere to the north, the low rumble of an L train crossing a bridge. "Mitchell would have loved this," Danny said quietly. "Briggs, too. You remember what Briggs used to say, the best operations are the ones where the enemy never sees you coming." "I remember." "He'd have gotten a real kick out of the cleaning cart." Jack almost laughed. Almost. But the mention of Briggs, the memory of his face, his voice, his laugh, hit a place inside him that still hadn't healed and maybe never would. "Danny." "Yeah. Thank you. For coming. For being here." Danny looked at him. "Brother, I've been waiting 4 years for you to pick up the damn phone. You think I'm going to miss the one time you actually need me?" Jack felt something break loose in his chest. Not a crack, not a fracture. More like a knot untying a tension he had been carrying so long he had forgotten it was there. "I'm sorry," Jack said, "for disappearing. For not calling, for shutting you out. I know why you did it. You were protecting yourself. You were protecting Grace. I understood." "That doesn't make it right." "No, it doesn't. But you're here now. That's what matters." They stood in silence for a moment. Two old soldiers, two brothers who had survived what should have killed them and come out the other side carrying wounds that nobody else could see. "What happens now?" Danny asked. "Now we wait. The FBI has the evidence. They'll build the case. Raymond will cooperate because his only option is to cooperate, and eventually they'll find Kessler. And if they don't," Jack looked at him, "then we will." Danny nodded. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. They had spent enough years operating in the spaces where official channels ended and personal conviction began. "Get some sleep, Jack. You look like death." "Thanks. I mean it. Go home. Hug your kid. Eat something. Sleep for 12 hours. Monday is going to be interesting." Jack nodded. He shook Danny's hand, the grip firm, the contact lasting a beat longer than necessary. The handshake of men who trusted each other with their lives, and always would. Then he turned and walked home. The sun was just beginning to rise. The sky over Chicago was a thin line of gold above the buildings, the kind of light that made the city look clean and new, like the night had washed away everything ugly and left only the possibility of a fresh start. Jack climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. He knocked on Mrs. Patterson's door. She opened it immediately. She was still dressed. She hadn't slept either. "She's asleep on the couch," Mrs. Patterson said, looking Jack up and down. She paused on the tactical vest still visible under his unzipped jacket. She said nothing about it. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson." "You kept your promise." "I did." "Good. There are leftover snickerdoodles on the counter. Take them home." Jack stepped inside. Grace was curled up on Mrs. Patterson's couch, wrapped in an Afghan blanket, her face peaceful, her breathing slow and steady. The 1,000-piece castle puzzle was half finished on the coffee table beside her. Jack knelt beside the couch. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. She stirred but didn't wake. He picked her up carefully the way he had been picking her up since she was small enough to fit in one arm. She was heavier now, 9 years old, all knees and elbows, but he held her like she weighed nothing at all. She mumbled something against his shoulder. "Shh," he whispered. "I'm here. I've got you." "Dad." "Yeah, Gracie, it's me." "Did you come home?" "I came home." She wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her face into his collar. "Told you," she murmured. "Pinky promises are legally binding." Jack carried his daughter across the hall to their apartment. He laid her on her bed and pulled the covers up to her chin. He sat on the edge of the mattress and watched her fall back into deep sleep, her breathing evening out, her small hands curled against the pillow. He sat there for a long time, the tactical vest pressed against his chest. The earpiece was still in his ear, silent now. His knuckles were bruised from the strikes he had delivered hours ago. His body was running on adrenaline and caffeine, and the stubborn refusal to collapse until he knew his daughter was safe. She was safe. He had kept his promise. But somewhere out there, Thomas Kessler was still free, still running, still planning his next move, and Jack knew with the certainty of a man who had spent his life studying predators that Kessler would not let this go. Men like Kessler didn't absorb losses. They retaliated. They found the pressure points. They struck where it hurt most. And Jack's pressure point was sleeping 3 feet away from him, clutching a pillow and dreaming about castles and dogs and a world where fathers always came home. Jack leaned down and kissed Grace's forehead. "Nobody's going to touch you," he whispered. "Nobody. Ever." It wasn't a promise this time. It was an oath. And Jack Mercer, former Navy SEAL night janitor, single father, invisible man, who had finally stepped into the light, intended to keep it with everything he had left. 3 months passed. The world moved on, the way it always does, fast, loud, and indifferent to the quiet battles fought by ordinary people in ordinary buildings. But for Jack Mercer, nothing about those 3 months was ordinary. The FBI investigation unfolded like a detonation in slow motion. Raymond Voss cooperated fully, turning over every name, every account number, every communication he had ever exchanged with Thomas Kessler's network. He did it not out of conscience, but out of survival, the desperate, self-preserving calculation of a man who understood that his only chance of seeing daylight again was to become more useful to the government than he was to the man who had abandoned him. And it worked, partly. Raymond's testimony, combined with the evidence Jack had pulled from the server room, gave the FBI enough to dismantle the shell company network across 3 countries. Accounts were frozen. Assets were seized. 7 individuals connected to Kessler's operation were arrested in 4 different states. The Chinese pharmaceutical company severed ties overnight. The London intelligence firm issued a statement denying any involvement and then quietly shuttered its offices. But Kessler himself remained a ghost. For 6 weeks, there was nothing. No sightings, no communications, no digital footprint. The man had spent decades building escape routes, and he used every one of them. Agent Ortiz called Jack twice during that period, once to update him on the investigation and once to warn him. "He's still out there," she said during the second call, "and our intelligence suggests he's not running, he's regrouping." "I know," Jack said. "We've increased surveillance on your residence and Ms. Shaw's, but I want you to understand Kessler is patient. He doesn't act impulsively. When he moves, it will be calculated." "I understand. Do you have a plan?" "I always have a plan." There was a pause on the line. "Mr. Mercer, I've read enough of your file to know that your definition of plan and the Bureau's definition of plan are very different things." "Is that a problem?" "It's a concern. Don't do anything that creates more paperwork for me." "I'll do my best." She hung up. Jack sat at his kitchen table and stared at his phone. Grace was in the next room doing homework, humming a song she had learned in music class. Mrs. Patterson was downstairs baking something that smelled like cinnamon. Normal life, or something that looked like it. But Jack knew it wasn't over. He could feel Kessler out there the way a sailor feels a storm before the sky changes, a pressure in the air, a wrongness in the silence, a tension that had no source and no resolution. Until it did. The break came on a Tuesday morning, 7 weeks after the raid on Shaw Dynamics. Danny called at 6 a.m. "They got him," Danny said. Jack was pouring coffee. His hand stopped. "Where?" "Zurich. I was trying to access one of his frozen accounts through a proxy. The Swiss authorities flagged the transaction and contacted Ortiz. She had a team on the ground within 4 hours. He's in custody. Federal marshals are transporting him back to the States." Jack set the coffee pot down. He leaned against the counter. He closed his eyes. For a long moment he didn't say anything. He just stood there, breathing, feeling something loosen inside his chest that had been wound tight for 7 years. "Jack," Danny said. "You there?" "I'm here." "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." "Mitchell, Briggs, Donahue." Danny's voice was rough. "This is for them. This is for them." They were quiet together. Two men on a phone call separated by 800 miles, connected by something that distance could never break. "What are you going to do now?" Danny asked. Jack opened his eyes. He looked through the kitchen doorway at Grace, who was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, arranging colored pencils in a precise spectrum from red to violet, completely absorbed in a task that mattered to no one in the world except her. "I'm going to finish making breakfast," Jack said. Danny laughed. It was a good laugh. Full, real, the kind of laugh that only comes from the far side of something terrible. "You do that, brother. You do that." They hung up. Jack finished making breakfast. He made pancakes, the good kind, with blueberries and real maple syrup, the kind he only made on special occasions. Grace came into the kitchen and stopped. She looked at the pancakes. She looked at Jack. "It's a Tuesday," she said. "I know. Pancakes are for weekends. I'm changing the rules again. You can't keep changing the rules. Watch me." Grace sat down. She poured syrup on her pancakes with the careful deliberation of a surgeon. She took a bite. She chewed. She looked at him. "Something good happened," she said. "What makes you say that?" "Because you're smiling. Not your regular smile, your real one. You've got two smiles, Dad. The one you use when you're pretending everything is fine, and the one you use when everything actually is fine. This is the second one." Jack looked at his daughter. 9 years old. The most perceptive human being he had ever met, and he had met intelligence operatives whose entire careers depended on reading people. "Something good happened," he confirmed. "Are you going to tell me what someday, when you're older?" "You always say that. Because you keep asking about things that require context you don't have yet. That's a fancy way of saying no. It's a respectful way of saying not yet." Grace pointed her fork at him. "I'm going to remember all these not yets, Dad, and when I'm older, I'm going to sit you down and make you answer every single one." "I look forward to it." "You should be scared." "I am. Terrified." Grace grinned, the gap-toothed grin, the best thing in the world. They finished breakfast together. Jack walked her to school. He stood at the gate and watched her disappear through the doors, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, he didn't feel like he was watching her walk away from him. He felt like he was watching her walk towards something, a future that was safe, protected, held in place by a foundation that wasn't going to crack. He walked to Shaw Dynamics. He hadn't been back since the night of the raid. Catherine had told him to take time off. She had insisted, actually, in the firm, non-negotiable way that she insisted on most things. "You just stopped a hostile takeover and saved my company," she had said. "Take a week, take a month, take whatever you need." "I don't need time off. I need to finish waxing the floors on 38. Jack." "Catherine, you are the most stubborn human being I have ever met." "That's what my daughter says." But he had taken the time, not because he needed rest, though he did, but because he needed to think about what came next, about who he wanted to be now that the mask he had worn for 4 years was gone. He walked through the lobby of Shaw Dynamics and headed for the elevators. Phil, the security guard, looked up from his phone. "Jack, haven't seen you in weeks. You coming back?" "Something like that." "Good. The new night guy doesn't clean the corners. I keep telling him you've got to get the corners." "I'll pass that along." Jack took the elevator to the 40th floor. He walked down the hallway, the same hallway where he had listened to Raymond Voss threaten Catherine, the same hallway where he had pressed himself into a shadow and made the choice that changed everything. Catherine's office door was open. She was sitting at her desk, but she looked different. The dark circles under her eyes were gone. Her shoulders were relaxed. She was reading something on her computer with a faint smile that Jack had never seen before, the smile of a woman who had fought for her life and won. He knocked on the door frame. She looked up. The smile widened. "The janitor returns," she said. "The janitor never left. He was on an extended break." Catherine stood and came around the desk. She was wearing a dark blue suit that reminded Jack of the first time he had seen her standing at the end of the hallway on 39, suspicious and exhausted and utterly alone. She wasn't alone anymore. "I heard about Kessler," she said. "News travels fast. FBI called me an hour ago. He's in federal custody. They're charging him with espionage, fraud, and conspiracy. Agent Ortiz said the evidence from the server room is the foundation of the entire case." "Good. Good, Jack. This is more than good. This changes everything. For the company, for my father's legacy, for the technology. We can finally move forward without looking over our shoulders." Jack nodded. He was glad. genuinely glad. But there was a quieter emotion underneath the gladness, the bittersweet recognition that justice, when it finally arrives, doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't erase the scars. It just draws a line and says this far and no further. Mitchell, Briggs, and Donahue were still gone. No indictment would change that. But their killer was in chains. And that mattered. It mattered more than Jack could say. Catherine reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a folder. She handed it to him. "What's this?" Jack asked. "Open it." He opened it. Inside was a formal offer letter on Shaw Dynamics letterhead. The position was head of corporate security. The salary was 6 figures. The benefits included health insurance, a retirement plan, and a clause that Jack had to read twice to make sure he understood correctly: full tuition coverage for one dependent child through undergraduate education. Jack stared at the paper. "Before you say no," Catherine said, "hear me out. I wasn't going to say no. You weren't. I was going to say you're overpaying me." Catherine laughed. It was the first time he had heard her laugh, a real laugh, full and surprised, like she had forgotten the sound and was hearing it again for the first time. "I'm not overpaying you," she said. "I'm paying you what you're worth, which frankly is more than what's on that paper, but my CFO said I had to be reasonable." "Catherine, you saved my company. You saved my father's life's work. You walked into a room with armed men and a cleaning cart and you—" She stopped. She pressed her lips together. Her eyes were bright. "You showed up. When nobody else would. When you had every reason not to. You showed up." Jack looked at the offer letter. Then he looked at Catherine. "I didn't do it for a job," he said. "I know. That's exactly why I'm offering you one." Jack was quiet for a moment. He thought about the night shift, the mop, the cleaning cart, the 4 years of invisibility that had kept him safe, but also kept him frozen, locked in a version of himself that was only half alive. I thought about Grace, about the tuition clause on that paper, about the future he could give her if he stopped hiding and started building. He thought about Rebecca, about what she would say if she could see him now. He could hear her voice, clear and warm and slightly exasperated the way it always was when he was being unnecessarily difficult. Jack Mercer, if someone offers you a chance to stop mopping floors and start living your life and you turn it down because of pride or fear or whatever ridiculous reason you're cooking up in that thick skull of yours, I swear to God. Jack smiled. "I'll take it," he said. Catherine extended her hand. He shook it. The same firm grip from the first night when they had stood in this office and agreed to fight together. But this time, there was no fear behind it, no desperation, just the steady, solid handshake of two people who had earned each other's trust the hardest way possible. "Welcome to Shaw Dynamics, Mr. Mercer, officially this time." "Thank you, Miss Shaw." "Catherine." "Catherine." She smiled. He smiled back. And for a moment, standing in the office where everything had nearly been destroyed, something new took root. Not romance, not obligation, but the rarest kind of connection, the bond between two people who had seen each other at their most vulnerable and chosen to stay. Jack left her office and walked down the hallway toward the elevator. He passed the conference room where he had fought. He passed the supply closet where he had hidden his tools. He passed the spot on the floor where he had stood in the shadows, listening, deciding, choosing. The building hadn't changed. The hallways were the same. The lights hummed the same way. The elevator made the same soft chime when the doors opened. But the man walking through them was different. I wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't hiding. He was still carrying scars, still imperfect, still waking up some nights with the sound of gunfire in his ears and sand in his throat and the faces of men he couldn't save burned into the backs of his eyelids. But he had stopped running from those ghosts. He had turned around and faced them, and in facing them, he had found something he didn't expect. Not redemption. Redemption was too clean a word for the messy, complicated, beautiful process of learning to live with your own history. What he found was simpler than that. He found that he was still capable of choosing to help, still capable of standing between danger and innocence, still capable of being the man his daughter believed he was, and that was enough. Jack walked out of Shaw Dynamics into the Chicago sunlight. The city was loud and bright and full of people rushing past each other without a second glance. The daily anonymous current of millions of lives intersecting and separating and never knowing what the person next to them was carrying. He pulled out his phone and called Grace's school. "Hi, this is Jack Mercer, Grace Mercer's father. I'd like to pick her up early today if that's possible." "Of course, Mr. Mercer." Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine. We've got something to celebrate." He hung up and walked toward the school. The sun was warm on his face. His steps were steady, his shoulders were straight, not the forced straightness of a man pretending to be someone he wasn't, but the natural posture of a man who had finally stopped pretending altogether. He picked Grace up at the gate. She came running out with her backpack bouncing and her ponytail flying and that gap-toothed grin that could power every light in Chicago. "Why are you picking me up early?" she asked. "Because I have good news." "What kind of good news?" "The kind that comes with ice cream." "On a Tuesday." "On a Tuesday." Grace looked at him. She studied his face the way she always did, carefully, thoroughly, with the quiet intensity of a child who had learned early that the people you loved didn't always tell you everything. "You look different again, Dad," she said. "Different how? I don't know, like you put something down that you've been carrying for a long time." Jack took her hand. Her small fingers wrapped around his, warm, trusting, unbreakable. "I did, Gracie," he said. "I finally did." They walked together through the streets of Chicago, a father and his daughter hand in hand, heading toward ice cream and a future that neither of them could see, but both of them believed in. Behind them, the Shaw Dynamics building rose into the sky, catching the sunlight on its windows like a signal fire. And somewhere inside that building on floors 38 through 40, a cleaning cart sat in a supply closet, its wheels still its mop dry, waiting for a man who would never push it again. Because Jack Mercer had spent 4 years becoming invisible, and he had spent one night remembering that the people the world overlooks are sometimes the only ones brave enough to save it.